Chapter 1068. Looking at the empty secret prison, second elder and third elder finally remembered a person, a woman. Long Fei Yi had already noticed the undamaged lock. He asked coldly, who saved him? It was, second elder didn't know how to answer, so he simply said, a few months ago, sect master brought a woman back. That woman always wore a black veil, so the two of us have never seen what she looked like. Sect master trusts her greatly, and she also has the key to the secret prison. She must be the one who took him away. Yes, it must be her. Other than us elders, only she has the key. Third elder hurriedly added. They had no other choice. They didn't want to die, so they could only tell the truth. Who is that person? Han Yunxi asked. We don't know who that woman is either. She's very familiar with Tianshan, so it's very likely that she's from Tianshan Kenzo. Second elder answered. What kind of woman in Tianshan Kenzo could catch Bai Yanqing's eye? Could it be a disciple of the commandment courtyard? Where did Bai Yanqing go? Han Yunxi questioned. The three elders didn't understand. Who was Bai Yanqing? He's your sect master. Where did he go? Han Yunxi asked coldly. If it wasn't for something important, why would Bai Yanqing leave so easily? The two elders were shocked and blurted out, Bai Yanqing. Yes, it's Bai Yanqing. Why, you don't even know your own sect master's identity. Isn't this too ridiculous? Han Yunxi probed. The two elders looked at each other, so shocked that they didn't know what to say. They could only shake their heads. From the looks of it, other than Gong Beiqin, who knew poison, no one in Evil Sword School knew Bai Yanqing's identity. How did Bai Yanqing hide his identity? How did he become Evil Sword School's sect master? Han Yunxi was very curious. Princess of Western Qin, our sect master's surname is Hua and his name is Yushu. He was promoted to the position by sect master Bai before he went into seclusion. How could it be Bai Yanqing? The second elder's face was full of disbelief. Old sect master Bai. Are you senior Bai Shanqing? Long Fei Yi asked. Yes. The second elder hesitated for a bit before helplessly saying, East Qin Crown Prince, the Evil Sword School's internal energy cultivation technique has a large flaw and it's easy to go mad. You must have heard of it, right? So what? Long Fei Yi asked. The reason why Sect Master Hua colluded with Tianshan Kenzo's Lockhart Courtyard and the two pavilions was because of the Ganjiang sword. Sect Master Hua wanted to use the power of the Ganjiang treasured sword to cultivate his inner force to the maximum level in order to find a way to make up for it. It could also be considered finding a way out for the several hundred disciples of the Evil Sword School. The second elder honestly said. They never thought that Bai Yanqing would have studied the Evil Sword School's internal energy cultivation technique this thoroughly, knowing how to use the power of the Ganjiang treasured sword to make up for it. When did he enter the Evil Sword School? Did he change his name the entire time to enter the Evil Sword School or did he impersonate someone halfway through? No matter what the situation was, Bai Yanqing had deceived the disciples of the Evil Sword School. This was because from the fake letters he replied to, he wanted the Ganjiang treasured sword because he was afraid it would fall into Long Fei Ye's hands. His real goal was to completely destroy the chance of her dual cultivation with Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi understood this in her heart and her lips curled into a cold smile. Your sect master used poison to attack Heaven Mountain, but you didn't suspect where he got the poison from. Gong Beiqin's poison skills are so powerful, but you didn't suspect him. The second elder and third elder looked at each other in dismay. Finally, third elder explained, Gong Beiqin had entered 100 Poison's sect to learn about poison when he was young, but, speaking till here, third elder couldn't help but ask, Princess of Western Qin, how can you be sure that our sect master is Bai Yanqing? Our sect master has always been in closed-door cultivation in the mountains and only came out recently. Do you have a portrait? Han Yunshi asked. It's in the Evil Sword Pavilion. The second elder hurriedly replied. Gu Beiyue quickly made a trip to the Evil Sword Pavilion halfway up the mountain and brought back Sect Master Hua's portrait. When Han Yunshi and the rest saw the portrait, they immediately knew what was going on. This portrait was completely different from Bai Yanqing's face. They were originally worried that Bai Yanqing had grown up in the Evil Sword School and had been promoted by Bai Shanqing. Now it seemed that the real sect master Hua had long been killed by Bai Yanqing and Bai Yanqing was an impostor. In other words, they could rest assured about old sect master Bai Shanqing and Yi Shao. That pair of master and disciple had nothing to do with Bai Yanqing. They definitely didn't know that Bai Yanqing had impersonated the Evil Sword School's sect master. Princess of Western Qin, this. What exactly is going on? The second elder asked seriously. Although the two elders' attitudes were extremely good, Han Yunshi hadn't forgotten what the Evil Sword School had done to Tianshan Kenzo. She also hadn't forgotten how these two elders had tortured Kenshin's master. Just because they wanted to obtain the Ganjiang sword and save their own disciples, they could slaughter other people's disciples? Old sect master Bai Shanqing had already discussed the reconciliation between the two sects with Kenshin. Why couldn't they swallow their pride and reconcile with Tianshan Kenzo? Why did they have to use poison? Ganjiang sword aside, these people from the Evil Sword School had bad intentions. Han Yunshi wasn't in the mood to explain so much to these two elders. They still had to go back to the peak of Tianshan Kenzo to find out who the woman who took away the third venerable was. These two elders didn't even know Bai Yanqing's background. How would they know anything else? They would have interrogated him for nothing. Now it seemed that they had killed Gong Beichen too early. I believe the two elders haven't seen the Ganjiang sword before, right? Han Yunshi asked. The two elders nodded. Compared to their previous arrogance, they were more servile than slaves now. That's right. Gu is carrying the Ganjiang sword. Take a good look. Han Yunshi smiled. The two elders both looked back, but it was at this moment that two poison needles flew out of Han Yunshi's sleeves and struck them between the eyebrows. Both of them gave a start before they fainted. Han Yunshi could neutralize Bai Yanqing's poison. Bai Yanqing might not be able to neutralize Han Yunshi's poison. Han Yunshi didn't touch the disciples who didn't manage to escape in time. She allowed them to escape and let Gu Beiyue keep these two elders in the Evil Sword School's Evil Sword Pavilion. This was her provocation to Bai Yanqing in terms of poison. However, Long Fei Ye's provocation to Bai Yanqing was even more domineering. Long Fei Ye said, Gu Beiyue, when everyone has escaped, destroy the Evil Sword School for this crown prince and keep it in the Evil Sword Pavilion. Long Fei Ye wasn't just provoking Bai Yanqing. He was also telling the world that his sect, Tianshan Kenzo, would always be the authority of the martial arts world. They were not to be challenged. With Gu Beiyue taking care of things, everyone was at ease. Gu Beiyue stayed in the Evil Sword School. Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi returned to the peak of Tianshan Mountain first. Gu lowered his head and followed behind them. Gu was a person who especially liked crowds. However, he was especially quiet on the way back. It wasn't for any other reason. It was because the sword on his back was too heavy. It was so heavy that he didn't even have the strength to speak. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi used their qinggong and stepped on the leaves to fly higher and higher. Gu was having a hard time chasing after them. Who knew that at this time, Moc's sword spirit would actually run out on its own and turn into a faint red light. After circling around Gu a few times, it covered the Ganjiang sword on his back. Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi felt the sword qi and turned back to look. They saw that the red light was gentle and faint. It lingered around the Ganjiang sword like a pair of lovers rubbing their ears together. It was very intimate. Long Fei Yi secretly decided that no matter what, he would definitely let Han Yunxi have Mo Xie's sword. Han Yunxi also secretly decided that no matter what, she would definitely obtain Mo Xie's sword. Gu didn't have any other thoughts. He just wanted to find a place to lie down at the top of Tian Shan Mountain. Once they arrived at the top of Tian Shan Mountain, Gu really didn't care about anything. He lay down on a high roof and panted as he looked down at Han Yunxi and the others. At this time, the whole of Tian Shan Kenzo had basically calmed down. The 55 pavilion lords of the Four Mountains led their disciples to clean up the corpses and search for any deserters hiding in the mountains. Granny Yu brought a few disciples to take control of Lockhart Courtyard. Fortunately, there were many Nirvana cultivation manuals in Lockhart Courtyard. When Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi arrived, First Venerable and Second Venerable immediately asked about Third Venerable. Long Fei Yi told them the truth. The two Venerables and Granny Yu were very shocked. The disciples of my discipline hall will definitely not betray Kenzo. Granny Yu was very confident. Could it be a disciple of Lockhart Courtyard? Second Venerable asked. For Bai Yanqing to take a liking to someone, it had to be someone important in Kenzo. They thought about it and concluded that only a few female disciples of Lockhart Courtyard had some status. At this time, a disciple of the discipline hall hurried over. Venerable Elder Duanmu Yao is missing. The disciples of the discipline hall were in charge of cleaning up the top of Tian Shan Mountain. The dungeons weren't their main focus, which was why they were delayed until so late. Once the disciple reported it, everyone understood what was going on. There was no doubt that Duanmu Yao had been secretly rescued by Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing had used Duanmu Yao's understanding of Tian Shan Kenzo to secretly take control of the entire Kenzo in such a short time. They didn't expect Duanmu Yao to be able to cause such a huge commotion even with her looks and martial arts crippled. They had underestimated her. We should have killed her long ago. Granny Yu was especially depressed. If not for the sake of Kenshin's sect head, she wouldn't have simply locked up Duanmu Yao as the head of the discipline hall. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with a chilly light before she said, she better not fall into this princess's hands. Duanmu Yao had fled with Second Venerable to seek refuge with Bai Yanqing. Heaven knows where Bai Yanqing had hidden himself this time. Fei, dual cultivation is more important. You should find a swordsmith as soon as possible, Head Venerable said. After the internal strife, Tian Shan Kenzo's vitality had been greatly damaged. There were many things waiting to be done, so it would be best if Long Fei Yi, the senior disciple of Kenzo, stayed behind to preside over the situation. Still, Head Venerable had a sense of urgency. After some hesitation, Long Fei Yi murmured, "We'll leave after Master wakes up." Head Venerable, I remember that Hidden Sword Depository has plenty of high-quality Ganjiang sword imitations. There are a few, but you're thinking. Head Venerable didn't understand. Han Yunxi laughed and muttered, "We'll beat them at their own game. Don't tell anyone that Long Fei Yi has subdued Ganjiang." Chapter 1069. After such a huge commotion in Tianshan Kenzo, many disciples from the Evil Sword School and the residents and depositories had fled. Naturally, it was impossible to keep the news under wraps. Even if they could, Duanmu Yao would still tell Bai Yanqing about the changes in Celestial Mountain as soon as possible. Even so, Han Yunxi's group could still beat her at her own game. That was because they were the only ones who knew that Long Fei Yi had subdued the Ganjiang sword. Meanwhile, the second and third elders of the Evil Sword School had been killed despite being unconscious. Since Bai Yanqing had set his sights on Ganjiang and wanted to ruin their dual cultivation, they had to create a false impression that Bai Yanqing had sealed the sword away instead of subduing it. Just what is Bai Yanqing planning? What is he afraid of? Long Fei Yi asked with furrowed brows. He still couldn't figure it out. With Bai Yanqing's strength, there was no need for him to hide from them or scheme against them. If they really fought, Bai Yanqing would have a better chance of winning. But Bai Yanqing seemed to be hiding from them and scheming against them the entire time. It was impossible to tell what his motives were. First, he wasn't fighting for the Wind Clan, and second, he didn't want their lives. What did he want? Han Yunxi was lost as well, while the two honored elders and Granny Yu were even more lost. They only rejoiced that Fei had arrived in time, or else Tianshan Kenzo's centuries-old foundation would have been destroyed in a single day. At this moment, a series of rumbling sounds came from behind the mountain. Everyone rushed to the top of the cliff and saw the Evil Sword School's buildings had all collapsed, leaving only the Evil Sword Depository standing above the rubble. It stood out like a sore thumb. Soon enough, Gu Beiyue returned. The two honored elders personally went to rebuild the sword ceiling platform while Granny Yu shouldered everyone else to deal with the mess of the residents and depositories. After figuring out everything, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi could finally breathe a sigh of relief. They stayed by Master Kenshin's bedside. Although they had once been furious and hated Master Kenshin because of Han Yunxi, Master Kenshin was still alive. However, Long Fei Yi was still very filial to his master. After sitting with Han Yunxi for a while, he asked Han Yunxi to wait outside. He wanted to inject some true qi into Master Kenshin. Han Yunxi bumped into Gu Beiyue the moment she stepped out of the door. "Princess, is Kenshin-senpai alright? Do you need my help?" Gu Beiyue was humble and respectful. "He's waiting inside. You can go in later," Han Yunxi said in a low voice. In fact, she sympathized with Kenshin's master more than she respected him. In her opinion, Kenshin was mainly responsible for the chaos in Tianshan Kenzo today. If not for Lockhart Courtyard, Sutra Depository, and Sword Depository acting as spies, no matter how capable Bai Yanqing was, he wouldn't have been able to control Tianshan Kenzo so silently. And the betrayal of the residents and depositories was ultimately due to Li Kenshin's inaction all these years. Han Yunxi naturally wouldn't say these words out loud. She was giving face to Long Fei Yi. "Princess, sit down and rest. You've been working hard for the past few days. You should find some time to rest and recuperate," Gu Beiyue said seriously. Han Yunxi sat down at the stone table in the courtyard while Gu Beiyue stood to the side. Han Yunxi was helpless. She frowned and looked at Gu Beiyue without saying a word. Gu Beiyue was calm at first, but after a while, he started to feel uneasy. He consciously sat down across from Han Yunxi. This time, Han Yunxi stopped staring at him. "Ning Jing should have given birth by now, right? I wonder if it's a boy or a girl. Why hasn't there been any news from Tangli yet?" Han Yunxi had been thinking about this matter. "Princess, the matter of Tianshan must be settled as soon as possible. It will take more than 10 days to return to Three-Way Black Market. The northern expedition cannot be delayed any longer," Gu Beiyue said seriously. "I know." Han Yunxi was the most anxious. Gu Beiyue was quiet for a while. He seemed to hesitate, but he still spoke up. "Princess, may I take your pulse?" "What's wrong?" Han Yunxi was confused. "Princess came into work and your complexion doesn't seem good. This subordinate is worried." Gu Beiyue calmly expressed his concern. Han Yunxi immediately reached out her hand. "I'm just a bit tired and lack of sleep. Everything else is fine," Gu Beiyue said before taking his pulse. "There's a deficiency in his qi and blood." This was an old problem. It had been like this since she left the East Qin camp. It wasn't a big problem, it was just that she was too tired and didn't have time to rest. She was always busy and lacked sleep. Even if there were many miraculous pills, it wouldn't help. Sleeping and relaxing was the best way for a woman to recover. When Han Yunxi reached over, Gu Beiyue quickly took out a small medicine pouch he carried with him and gave it to her. He gently pressed 2 fingers on Han Yunxi's pulse and seriously pondered. With Gu Beiyue's ability, he only needed a bit of time to understand a person's body, but this time he pondered for a long time. It was so long that Han Yunxi was a bit flustered. She wondered if there was a big problem with her body. When she wanted to ask, Gu lying on the roof to the side spoke first. Gu Beiyue, what's wrong with Poison Girl? Gu Beiyue ignored him, but Han Yunxi looked up. She hooked her finger and signaled for Gu to come down. Even if Gu was carrying Ganjiang, he would immediately fly down when he saw Han Yunxi hooking her finger. He quickly arrived in front of Han Yunxi and asked with a smile, Poison Girl, what do you want to say? Show. Han Yunxi hooked her finger at him and didn't call for him to come down because she didn't want to alarm the surrounding people. She said in a low voice, find a black cloth to wrap Ganjiang and disguise it. Don't let anyone see that you're carrying a sword, understand? There were many people who knew that Gu had Immerse's sword spirit. If Gu also carried a sword on his back, it would inevitably arouse suspicion. Therefore, it was better to disguise it. Ganjiang was already very heavy. Wouldn't it be even heavier if it was disguised? If this had been instructed by Long Feiyi, Gu would definitely have thrown Ganjiang to Long Feiyi. However, this had been instructed by Han Yunxi, so Gu was very straightforward. He only answered with a single word, okay, and immediately went to do it. After Gu left, Gu Beiyue continued to take her pulse seriously. Han Yunxi was really flustered. Although she was a doctor, she didn't pay too much attention to her own body when she was alone. She only cared about living her life as happily as possible. However, it was different now. She was especially afraid that something would happen to her. If something were to happen to her, what would happen to Long Feiyi? Although she was flustered, she still joked, Academy head Gu, what kind of illness do I have? You've been trying to diagnose it for so long. Only then did Gu Beiyue let go of her hand and smiled. It's nothing serious. You're just a little weak and need to rest and recuperate. Princess, after we're done with Tianshan, you have to rest well on the way back to Three-Way Black Market. Leave the troublesome matters to His Highness and this subordinate, all right? Gu Beiyue, are you lying to me? Han Yunxi narrowed her eyes. After taking her pulse for so long, this was it. How was that possible? Gu Beiyue hurriedly got up and even knelt on one knee. Princess, please understand. This subordinate would never dare to deceive you. Han Yunxi hurriedly got up and pulled him. Gu Beiyue, get up. If you continue like this, Han Yunxi didn't know what to do with him, but Gu Beiyue remained kneeling, his expression serious and quiet. It's done, it's done. I was just joking, so you can get up. At Han Yunxi's words, Gu Beiyue stood up and said, thank you for your understanding, princess. For the first time, Han Yunxi had the urge to kick him. This guy looked gentle and harmless, but he was actually too hateful. Gu Beiyue's lips curved into a faint smile. It was 3 parts helpless, 7 parts doting, and extremely warm. This 7 parts doting was exclusive to Han Yunxi, but she'd never see it. Just like that, Han Yunxi was unable to ask any more questions about his pulse. Still, she didn't take it to heart. After all, Gu Beiyue wouldn't trick her. If Gu Beiyue said it was nothing serious, then it had to be fine. Soon enough, Long Feiyi's voice came from inside the room. Yunxi, come in. Master's awake. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue rejoiced as they hurried inside, only to see Elder Kenzo leaning against a pillow, his face pale. Gu Beiwe went to take his pulse without a word, while Han Yunshi only said, "Senior Kenzo," before standing to one side. Elder Kenzo's injuries weren't light, but fortunately Long Fei Ye's true chi was protecting his body. After taking his pulse, Gu Beiwe went to prescribe medicine. Long Fei Yi told Elder Kenzo everything that had happened at Celestial Mountain and their dual cultivation. Hearing the story, Elder Kenzo broke out in cold sweat for him and Han Yunshi. "Fei, everything else can wait, but we have to hurry up with the sword forging," Kenzo said seriously. Long Fei Yi only nodded. Han Yunshi knew that they would have to wait until after the northern expedition. Elder Kenzo glanced at Han Yunshi with a smile. "Lass, old man underestimated you." Han Yunshi nodded without reservation. "Yes, you underestimated me." Elder Kenzo gave a start before laughing. This girl was very proud, but she had the right to be proud. "Senior Kenzo, because you underestimated me, you hurt me mentally. That's why I think you should compensate me," Han Yunshi said seriously. "What do you want?" Kenzo asked helplessly. What else did he have besides the empty title of Kenzo Sect Master? Moreover, this girl was doted on by Fei. Why would she need anything from him? Han Yunshi said, "Give me the manual for the Xian Nu swordplay. I want to practice this set of swordplay." Elder Kenzo gave a start. Ever since Duanmu Yao was imprisoned, he'd buried this matter deep in his heart. Seeing Kenzo's dilemma, Han Yunshi said seriously, "Senior Kenzo, don't misunderstand. I'm not practicing the Xian Nu swordplay to fulfill your wishes. I think that aside from Senior Luo Qingling, no one else will be able to make up for your regrets." Han Yunshi's words struck a chord with Elder Kenshin's heart. Regrets could never be made up for. A missed opportunity was a missed opportunity. Making up for it was just making up for it. Then what do you want to do? Elder Kenzo didn't understand. With Han Yunshi's current skills, one more set of Xian Nu swordplay wouldn't make much of a difference. Her poison needles were more than enough to protect herself. Cold, Han Yunshi said, "I want to use the Xian Nu swordplay to kill Duanmu Yao." Elder Kenzo froze, while Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiwe laughed soundlessly. Long Fei Yi was especially happy. Heaven knows what he was so happy about. Chapter 1070. Han Yunshi was so focused on the Xian Nu swordplay that she didn't even notice Long Fei Ye's strange behavior. Instead, it was the old man from Kenzo who glanced thoughtfully at Long Fei Yi. Only then did Han Yunshi look over, but Long Fei's face had long returned to its usual cold and solemn self. The old man was helpless. Han Yunshi didn't know what was going on and assumed that the old man wasn't planning to teach her the Xian Nu swordplay. After some thought, she quickly added, "Senior Kenzo, I'm sure Senior Luo wouldn't want the Xian Nu swordplay to become a useless piece of paper at the bottom of a chest, right?" The old man from Kenzo said seriously, "Lass, you have to be proper when taking on a master." This old man doesn't feel good hearing that. How many people in the world wanted to take him as their disciple? Even though his martial arts were crippled, he still had Tian Shan Kenzo's most secret sword manuals in his hands. They'd never been leaked. If this damned girl was Fei's concubine, then she should call him master just like Fei. It was fine if she didn't call him that, but now she was asking for his sword manuals without any self-awareness. He was even planning to be the martial arts master when she had children with Fei in the future and teach them personally. If he didn't take this chance to suppress her pride, how could he keep her children in check? Kenzo stroked his beard and waited for Han Yunshi to obediently kneel and call him master. But Han Yunshi only said, "Senior Kenzo, since you gave the Xian Nu swordplay to Senior Luo, then this sword manual should belong to Senior Luo, right? If Yunshi wants to take a master, it should be Senior Luo, right?" Han Yunshi asked seriously. Li Kenshin's heart gave a lurch at her words. He couldn't refute Han Yunqi's words. Where is Senior Luo's memorial tablet? I want to go there and worship him as my master. Han Yunqi's attitude was frank. Kenshin had never thought that someone would be willing to take Luo Qingling as their master after she had passed away for so many years. He suddenly realized how wrong he was. How could he let his disciple, how could he let Duan Muyao learn the Xian Nu swordplay? This sword technique belonged to Luo Qingling. Only her disciple had the right to inherit it. Good. Good. Kenshin Li was extremely excited. Girl, old man will take you there, old man will take you there right now. Kenshin Li was seriously injured, but he insisted on getting off the bed. Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue did not stop him either. They looked at Han Yunqi and didn't know what to say to this woman. She was so different from the rest. She was always surprising and convincing. Kenshin Li quickly brought them to a building in the 9th hall of 9 Xian Hall. This building was the highest point on Celestial Mountain. Standing here, one could see the entire mountain range. Luo Qingling's memorial tablet was placed here. Kenshin Li would come here every day to offer 2 sticks of incense and chat with Luo Qingling. He would only leave when the incense burned out. After being imprisoned by the evil sword school for so long, he had been here for months. As soon as he arrived, he hurried to wipe down the memorial tablet, then the incense burner and the offering table. Han Yunqi and the rest didn't disturb Kenzo as they watched him busying himself. They simply stood outside the door and watched quietly. In the face of love, everyone was equal. No matter how high one's status or achievements were, they would always be ordinary and lowly in front of the one they loved. Han Yunqi and the rest didn't enter until the Kenzo Li was done with his work. Han Yunqi personally lit 2 sticks of incense. She looked at the small wooden tablet magnanimously and humbly. She said seriously, I, Han Yunqi, Long Fei Ye's wife, will take Senior Luo Qingling as my master today. In the future, I will devote myself to practicing the Xian Nu swordsmanship and pass it on to the martial arts world. Han Yunqi then knelt down without hesitation. Master, please accept a bow from your disciple. Han Yunqi seriously kowtowed 3 times, causing the sword sect master's heart to fill with emotions at the sight. He was so moved that he couldn't speak. Luo Qingling also had a disciple. He knew that from now on, Luo Qingling's name would no longer be sealed in this small building. The Xian Nu swordsmanship would no longer be a memory. There would be legends of her in the martial arts world. Long Fei Yi looked at Han Yunqi's back and was a little dazed. Her self-introduction was so simple and straightforward. I, Han Yunqi, Long Fei Ye's wife. She didn't recognize any of the 3 identities, daughter of the Han family, Qin Wangfei, or princess of Western Qin. She only recognized one identity, his wife. Long Fei Ye's wife. He swore to himself that he would give these 4 words the greatest glory, surpassing any identity or status in this world. After becoming his disciple, Kenshin gave the Xian Nu swordsmanship to Han Yunqi. Han Yunqi had the nirvana internal strength at the peak level. In fact, she had already overcome the first obstacle in practicing the Xian Nu swordsmanship. She only needed to master the 7 major sword styles in the Xian Nu swordsmanship. She spent 3 days reading the original swordsmanship. There were only 3 or 4 parts that she didn't understand. She could learn the rest by herself. Only then was Kenshin stunned by Han Yunqi's talents. He assumed that Han Yunqi would need at least a month to fully understand the swordsmanship. Kenshin had to admit that Duan Muyao wasn't even a tenth of Han Yunqi's talent. Moreover, Han Yunqi's talents far surpassed Luo Qingling's in the past. Today, he told Long Fei Yi in private, Fei, this woman is your great fortune. Long Fei only smiled and didn't reply. In 3 days, the 2 honored elders finished repairing the sword sealing platform. They took out a high-quality replica of the Ganjiang's sword and locked it onto the platform. Then they stood guard on the left and right sides of the platform, exerting their strength to surround the platform with sword qi. This might not be enough to fool Bai Yanqing, but it could at least interfere with his judgment. Over the next 3 days, he also discussed the matter of forging a new sword. As the saying goes, one needs to sharpen a sword every 10 years. How could a single year be enough to make a good sword? Moreover, a sword that could withstand Immerse's sword spirit couldn't even be described as a good sword anymore. Forging a sword was no simple task. No matter how capable Yi Xiao was, he couldn't avoid the awkwardness of a cleverest housewife cooking without rice. They not only needed to find a suitable material, but a suitable fire as well. Fei, forging a sword is the most important task. Let's put the northern expedition on hold for now. The sword sect master tried his best to persuade him. The 2 venerables had the same opinion. They nodded and hoped that Li Jianqin, as the master, would be able to persuade his disciple. Long Fei Yi didn't speak. He had long discussed this with Han Yunxi. Whether it was saving lives or the northern expedition, neither could be delayed. That was what they owed Eastern and Western Qin, as well as the Ningqing siblings and Muling. Han Yunxi thought it over, then said, "Celestial fire. If we want it to be fast, we'll have to use celestial fire to refine it. If we can find something that can withstand celestial fire, we'll be able to forge Immerse's sword in no time." "Yunxi, where are you going to find something that can withstand celestial fire?" Kenzo asked immediately. "The earthly fire Kun furnace, oh. That thing's useless if you don't use it to forge a sword." An arrogant voice came from outside the door. Who else could it be but Gu? Han Yunxi jumped to her feet in delight. "That's right. That furnace can do it." Gu Beiyue was thrilled as well. "It's all thanks to Qi Xiao for thinking of this. The copper from the earthly fire Kun furnace is perfect. The earthly fire Kun furnace could withstand the heat of the earthly fire without being burned down, so it wouldn't be destroyed by celestial fire. Now that the furnace had lost its earthly fire, it could be melted down by celestial fire." Long Fei Yi didn't say a word, but he nodded his head. Kenzo and the 2 honored elders were pleasantly surprised as well, but Kenzo quickly asked, about this matter, could Pill Master? Before he could finish, Gu cut him off. "Leave this to me. Long Fei Yi, take Yi Xiao to medicine requesting cave as soon as possible. The sooner, the better." Gu walked in with a guqin on his back. His figure was tall, and his red robes were enchanting. His looks were enough to topple cities, and his smile was bewitching. Those who didn't know better might think he was a guqin master who wandered the world with a guqin as his companion, confident and at ease. But everyone present knew that Ganjiang was hidden inside his guqin, so it wasn't easy for him to carry it on his back. Actually, it wasn't just Gu. Even the 2 honored elders had trouble carrying Ganjiang. Only Long Fei Yi, who was the owner of Ganjiang, could easily hold the sword and unsheath it. Gu wished he could quickly reforge Immerse's sword so that Long Fei Yi could take back Ganjiang and let Immerse's sword spirit leave his body. And before Immerse's sword spirit left him, he wouldn't easily offend Long Fei Yi. Because if Long Fei Yi pulled out the sword, he would be stupid. With Gu asking, the old man of alchemy would not refuse. Han Yunxi was a bit embarrassed. After all, she was the one who gave the earthly fire Kun furnace to the old man of alchemy. Not only did she have to take it back, she might even destroy his precious furnace. This couldn't be justified. In the end, Han Yunxi personally prepared a large gift and had someone send it over. This large gift was none other than the snake pellet she obtained from the snake cave near the East Qin army camp. This thing was an extremely good supplement for refining pills. It was something that alchemists could only come across and not ask for. That day, Long Fei Yi personally wrote a letter and had someone send it to Su Donglin. He had Su Donglin personally deliver it to Yi Xiao. The matter of forging the sword could be considered settled. Even if Bai Yanqing knew that Gu had obtained Amo Xie's sword spirit, he couldn't guess where Amo Xie's sword spirit came from. He also didn't know that there was a person like Yi Xiao. However, Long Fei Yi was still cautious. He ordered someone to spread the news that he and Han Yunxi had left Tian Shan Mountain and were heading to the desert in the west in search of iron to forge the sword. When this news was released, Han Yunxi also had people spread several false rumors. Some said that she and Long Fei Yi had gone to Northern Li, some said that she and Long Fei Yi had gone to Jiangnan, and some said that she and Long Fei Yi had continued to stay on Tian Shan Mountain. These false rumors were enough to confuse Bai Yanqing's judgment. When the matter of forging the sword was settled, Granny Yu came to the ninth temple. In the past few days, Granny Yu had already imprisoned the traders and made an inventory of the losses in the scripture depository and sword depository. She also sent people to temporarily manage the affairs of the two pavilions. Elder Kenzo had always wanted to pass the position of sect head to Long Fei Yi. But how could a busy man like Long Fei Yi stay at the peak of Tianshan Kenzo all the time? Right now, there were no suitable candidates in Kenzo either. Granny Yu was worried that once Long Fei Yi's group left, Kenzo would fall into internal strife. After all, after this incident, the pavilion masters and disciples of the 55 sword pavilions would be bitterly disappointed with the peak of Mount Tianshan. Now that the two pavilions and two courtyards of the same sect were without a leader, the competition between the remaining disciples would definitely be more intense than before. Fei, why don't you stay here for a month or two and stabilize the situation first? Granny Yu advised earnestly. I can't do that. Han Yunxi was the first to speak. How could the elders of Tianshan Mountain understand their anxiety? There was no point in explaining, so Han Yunxi gave Elder Kenzo and Granny Yu an idea. Chapter 1071. Han Yunxi said to Elder Kenzo and Granny Yu, Tianshan Kenzo's management and promotion system is not only rigid, but also unfair. First, it's not conducive to management, second, it breeds corruption, and third, it leads to cliques. In my opinion, sect masters should use this opportunity to abolish the 55 pavilions, as well as the two courtyards and two pavilions rules of accepting disciples. Even the two supremacies, who hadn't been involved in the affairs of Tianshan Kenzo, looked over. The 55 sword pavilions and the two courtyards had existed since Tianshan Kenzo's ancient times. To enter Tianshan Kenzo, one had to first become a disciple of one of the 55 pavilions. Then, through a martial arts competition, one could ascend to the peak of Tianshan Mountain and enter Lockhart Courtyard to learn the Nirvana mantra. This rule had been in place for hundreds of years. How could it be changed so easily? Seeing the elders' troubled expressions, Han Yunxi said coldly, the ancient rules can't be changed, but people's hearts are not what they used to be. If there's a better system, why not change it? Elder Kenzo glanced at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi continued to drink his tea, seemingly having no intention of interrupting. Elder Kenzo knew his disciple too well. He knew that even if he didn't agree with Han Yunxi, when he passed the position to Long Fei Yi in the future, Long Fei Yi would still listen to Han Yunxi. What brilliant plan do you have? Why don't you share it with us? Elder Kenzo finally relented. Han Yunxi said, those who accept disciples don't manage affairs, and those in charge don't accept disciples. Abolish Lockhart Courtyard, Scripture Pavilion, and Sword Pavilion, and retain Commandment Courtyard. Anyone who enters Tianshan Mountain can only join the 55 sword pavilions. They can only have one master for life. Everyone listened quietly. Even Gu Beiyue and Gu, who were outsiders, were interested. Han Yunshi continued, Granny, you will continue to manage Commandment Courtyard and the entire sect's Commandment Courtyard. Scripture Pavilion and Sword Pavilion will be temporarily managed by the Supremacies. As for Lockhart Courtyard, abolish it. The pavilion masters of the 55 sword pavilions would arrange for their disciples to cultivate the Nirvana mantra. Those who have reached the second level of the Nirvana mantra and above will have the opportunity to enter the Hidden Sword Pavilion and the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion to choose a treasure sword and a sword manual. When Han Yunshi said this, the Kenzo old man stroked his beard and nodded. That's a good idea. Granny, you murmured, this way, the disciples at the foot of the mountain will have more chances. At least it's relatively fair. Only with fairness can we truly convince the masses, Han Yunshi said seriously. In the past, Tianshan Kenzo's selection system only had a few opportunities to compete every few years. Once the contestants failed, they would have to wait for another few years. But now, her method did not have a time limit. No matter when, as long as the disciples could advance, they would have the opportunity to come into contact with treasured swords and better sword manuals. He did not have to wait bitterly for the Sword Arts Conference, nor did he have to wait in fear for others to choose him. Practicing martial arts should be like this. Whoever is capable, go up. The two supremacies looked at each other and agreed with Han Yunshi's method. Han Yunshi continued, the two supremacies will only be in charge of the Hidden Sword Pavilion and the Hidden Sword Pavilion for 3 years. After 3 years, the Sword Arts Conference will be held. Regardless of whether the master of the Hidden Sword Pavilion or the disciples of the Hidden Sword Pavilion, they can all participate. The winner will be in charge of the Hidden Sword Pavilion and the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion. When she said this, Granny Yu was the first to applaud. Such a huge temptation was enough to make the disciples concentrate on practicing swordsmanship for the next 3 years. Being in charge of the Hidden Sword Pavilion and the Hidden Scriptures Pavilion was the most lucrative job. All traitors will be expelled from Kenzo, and any relatives of the traitors' 3 clans will not be accepted into the sect, Han Yunshi said seriously. Her punishment was really ruthless. If the traitors' 3 clans were not allowed to enter Tianshan Kenzo, how would those traitors have the face to stay in their clans and the martial arts world? And in the future, who would dare to easily betray Tianshan Kenzo? Granny Yu liked this method of punishment so much that she secretly wrote Han Yunshi's words into the sect's rules. Kenzo hoped that Long Fei Yi would inherit the position of sect master, but she hoped that Han Yunshi would be in charge of the abstinence courtyard. With Han Yunshi around, Tianshan Kenzo's discipline would be especially good. Supremacies, what do you think? Kenzo asked seriously. The sect master will be in charge of the internal affairs of the sect, the great supremacies said seriously. With these words, Kenzo could make the decision. He said to Granny Yu, let the news out first to calm the hearts of the people. We'll have to discuss the details slowly. Indeed, Han Yunshi only gave a rough idea. Kenzo still had to discuss a complete management and promotion system with Granny Yu and the others. Once Kenzo's situation stabilized, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunshi could leave without worries. Duanmu Yao didn't show up these days, and there was no news of her. With the 3rd supremacies in Duanmu Yao's hands, Han Yunshi and the others could only deal with the situation by sticking to the status quo. After Han Yunshi figured out all the problems with the Mystic Fairy Sword Book, she secretly left the mountain with Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue, and Gu. With Su Donglin not around, Gu Beiyue naturally took over Su Donglin's duties. He had arranged for a carriage and rations to be waiting at the foot of the mountain. Han Yunshi said as soon as she saw the carriage, let's ride horses. It'll be faster. Princess, everyone hasn't rested for months. If we keep rushing around like this, our bodies won't be able to take it. It's going to be a tough battle in Northernly, so we can use this chance to rest for a few days, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Hearing this, Long Fei pulled Han Yunxi onto the carriage. The difference between riding a carriage and riding a horse was only 4 or 5 days. Since Gu Beiyue had spoken, he naturally couldn't let Han Yunxi ride a horse. Han Yunxi had no choice but to sit obediently in the carriage. Gu Qishao looked at Gu Beiyue, his heart filled with gratitude. He immediately slipped into the back of the carriage and took down the Ganjiang sword. Just like that, the two carriages secretly left Tianshan Kenzhou. Su Donglin had gone to find Yi Shao, so only Bailey Mingxiang was left to take care of Chu Shifeng. Long Fei had given orders for Chu Shifeng to recover his martial arts before heading to Three-Way Black Market. There hadn't been much progress on Chu Tiannin's side, so Long Fei's group didn't stop by Western Zhou to meet him. Instead, they headed straight for Three-Way Black Market. Before leaving Celestial Mountain, Long Fei had ordered Bailey Yuanlong to prepare for the northern expedition. He and a few deputy generals would be on standby at Three-Way Black Market to prepare for a meeting with the D clan. Tang Li had also finished communicating with the D clan and was waiting for everyone to arrive before taking action. But Long Fei's group received bad news while they were still on the road. Ning Nuo had sent a letter to Bai Yuqiao, but Bai Yuqiao hadn't replied for half a month. In the past, secret letters were often delayed as well. After all, it wasn't convenient for Bai Yuqiao's side to deliver letters. But at most, he delayed a letter for 10 days. There had never been so many days without a reply. Ning Nuo and Tang Li both suspected that something had happened at Tiger's prison. Everyone was shocked when they heard the news. What else could have happened at Tiger's prison? It had to be Bai Yuqiao who'd exposed himself. Although this wouldn't affect the current situation much, it was a matter of life and death for the hostages. Especially Ning Cheng. Han Yunxi wanted to abandon the carriage and ride back on horseback. After all, they'd rested for a few days, so Long Fei had no objections. But who knew that just as the Shadow Guard arranged for a few horses to come over, Gu would inexplicably have a stomachache. He had to lie on his back to feel more comfortable. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue both examined him. He wasn't poisoned or sick. Both of them were at their wits' end. Even Gu Qishao was baffled. What's wrong with me? If not for the presence of Gu Beiyue, the doctor, Long Fei and Han Yunxi would have suspected that Gu was faking it. Why was he in such a strange pain? Was it a coincidence? You really can't find the cause? Long Fei asked seriously. I'm afraid it has something to do with his body constitution. We still have to observe him. Let's take the carriage. It's only a day or 2 away anyway. Gu Beiyue said softly. Although their whereabouts weren't exposed, they still had to be careful. They couldn't let Gu be too far away from them. It had to be known that if Bai Yanqing suddenly came, only Gu could guarantee their absolute safety. Long Fei didn't hesitate. He had the Shadow Guard change the horses in the carriage and the group continued to move forward. Gu laid on the carriage and gradually didn't hurt as much. But as soon as he sat up, he immediately felt pain again. He could only lie down obediently. Gu Beiyue stayed by his side. Seeing his depressed appearance, a sly look flashed past his eyes. He looked out of the window and chuckled to himself. Han Yunxi and the others were anxious on the road. Tang Li and Ning Nuo were anxious in Three-Way Black Market. Tang Li was on the verge of losing control. He wanted to go to Tiger's prison alone several times. Fortunately, the Shadow Guard saw him and stopped him. In the end, the Shadow Guard had no choice but to lock him in the room. The due date had long passed, but he couldn't be sure if Ning Jing had successfully given birth to the child or if Ning Jing and the child were still safe and sound. He knew nothing about Tiger's prison. How could he calm down? At this time, he was very regretful. He regretted being so righteous and sensible in the past. He didn't know how many times he had slapped himself in the face. He hated himself and felt that he was a good-for-nothing. In the dead of night, the banging on the door made the dozens of shadow guard nearby tremble in fear. "Let me out. Do you hear me? I order you all to let me out. I'm telling you, if you don't let me out, when my brother comes back, I'll kill you all. Do you hear me? I'll get out one day. I'll kill you all." Tangley crazily kicked and slammed the door. The shadow guards were at the door. Even though they were trembling in fear, they were still prepared to capture Tangley if he slammed the door and came out. If Tangley went to Tiger's prison at this juncture, he would really be courting death. The number of ambushes at Tiger's prison had doubled. Ning Qing still hadn't agreed to cooperate with Jun Yixia. Although Jun Yixia was still waiting for Ning Qing to change his mind, he was also prepared for revenge. "Ning Qing, I'll give you 5 more days. Think it over carefully. If you can't cooperate." Jun Yixia sneered, "This prince doesn't mind destroying both jade and common stone. This prince doesn't care about this world anymore." Since he couldn't win against Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, he didn't want to fight anymore. Let the eastern and western Qin conquer the northern Qin. Even if he had to abandon the 3 armies, he would lure Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi to Tiger's prison and perish together. After Jun Yixia finished speaking, he fed Ning Qing an antidote and left in a huff. However, before he reached the door, Ning Qing spoke. He said, "Jun Yixia, if you help me with something, I'll consider it carefully." Jun Yixia was overjoyed, but he didn't show it. He turned his back to Ning Qing and asked coldly, "What is it?" Chapter 1072. As long as Ning Qing agreed to cooperate, what conditions would Jun Yixia not agree to? Jun Yixia was actually prepared to give in. As long as Ning Qing was willing to help him, he was even willing to split the world with Ning Qing. In his opinion, the reason why Ning Qing hadn't betrayed Han Yunxi until now was only because he was worried that he wouldn't get the benefits he deserved from him. Not wanting the world and only wanting Han Yunxi was just bullshit. A man naturally prioritized the world. What was a woman? Jun Yixia's back was facing Ning Qing, and his self-mocking sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. He didn't even know why he had fallen into Ning Qing's trap and believed in that kind of nonsense. Jun Yixia waited for Ning Qing to state his conditions, but who knew that Ning Qing would make a request that surprised him very much. Ning Qing said, "You want to cooperate with me and help me punish the first traitor of the D clan." Uncle Qing, who was chained to the side, suddenly raised his head. "Master Ning," Jun Yixia was stunned at first, but then he turned around with a big laugh. He looked at Uncle Qing and asked him. "Yes." Ning Qing lowered his eyes and looked at Uncle Qing coldly. He saw the shock in Uncle Chang's eyes, the pleading in Uncle Chang's eyes, and the fear in Uncle Chang's eyes, but he was indifferent. "Master Ning, this old servant is doing this for your own good. Master Ning, this old servant has worked hard even if I didn't make any contributions. You can't treat this old servant like this. Master Ning." Uncle Qing shouted. Jun Yixia walked closer step by step and smiled. "But, to this prince, he is a great contributor. A traitor is a traitor. All reasons are excuses. Even if you render meritorious service, you can't use them again." Ning Qing said coldly. Jun Yixia naturally wanted Uncle Qing to stay. With Uncle Qing, a senior member of the D clan, he could at least provide him with a lot of internal information. However, just as he was about to persuade him, Ning Qing looked up at him. In the darkness, his single eye was suffused with an icy cold light, like a wolf waiting for an opportunity to strike in the night, causing people to fear him. Jun-Yi unconsciously stopped in his tracks. Jun-Yi, are you planning to work with him, or with this clan head? It seems like you haven't thought it through. Once you've made up your mind, you can talk to me again. Even though Ningqing was imprisoned on the gallows, he was still high and mighty, looking down at Jun-Yi with disdain. Although this sentence was for Jun-Yi to consider, it also cut off all room for consideration for Jun-Yi. If Jun-Yi hesitated even a little bit, Ningqing wouldn't work with him anymore. A servant, no matter how capable or how much he knew, was still a servant in the end. Jun-Yi laughed. Ningqing, how do you want to punish him? This prince is willing to do it for you. Master Ning. You can't do this to me. Master Ning, this old servant has served you for more than 20 years. You can't do this to this old servant, you can't. Master Ning, this old servant was wrong. This old servant knows that he was wrong. Master Ning, this old servant begs you, spare this old servant. Spare this old servant. Uncle Qing begged with all his might, instinctively struggling. The shackles on his hands and feet made crisp knocking sounds on the ground, which was especially loud in the dark and gloomy prison cell. In the midst of Uncle Cheng's pleas, Ningqing expressionlessly announced his punishment. Ningqing said, "Cut off the fingernails on his hands and feet." As soon as he said this, Uncle Cheng's pleas stopped abruptly, revealing a terrified expression. Jun-Yi's mouth twitched, and he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Ningqing, this brat, was indeed ruthless. What Ningqing said wasn't an ordinary fingernail cutting, but finger-cutting torture. This kind of torture didn't need any torture tools, only a sharp finger scissors. Men, tie him up for this prince. Jun-Yi immediately ordered. No. Master Ning, spare my life. Spare my life. This subordinate knows his mistake. This subordinate knows his mistake. Master Ning, this subordinate won't dare to do it again, I won't dare to do it again. Uncle Qing screamed at the top of his lungs. It was only at this time that he felt regret and fear. Unfortunately, it was all too late. Even if he had to give up everything, even if he had to give up his life, Ningqing wouldn't allow himself to betray him, let alone treat Uncle Qing. Leaving Uncle Qing alive would only make things easier for Jun-Yi. Ningqing had long wanted to kill him. Uncle Qing deserved to die, he deserved to die with his punishment. Ningqing didn't even think that he could escape, so how could he leave Uncle Qing alive? The soldiers quickly tied Uncle Qing to a wooden plank, securing his body, head, limbs, and even his palms and feet. Only the fingers on his hands and feet that couldn't move were exposed. So noisy, shut his mouth. Jun-Yi was already in a bad mood, and Uncle Cheng's noise made him even more irritated. Once Uncle Cheng's mouth was gagged, the small prison immediately quieted down. The soldiers brought over an incomparably sharp finger scissors. Jun-Yi wouldn't do it himself, so he threw the nail scissors to the attendant beside him and ordered in a deep voice, "Serve him well." Upon hearing this, Uncle Cheng's eyes widened. He struggled, but it was a pity that even if he used all his strength, he couldn't break free from the ropes on his body. The attendant knelt at his feet on one knee and pressed down on his thumb. The blade of the scissors pierced directly into the nail, all the way to the bottom. Uncle Cheng was in so much pain that all the pores on his body opened up. He wanted to scream, but he couldn't. The attendant didn't stop there, and pulled out the blade of the scissors fiercely. Following that, he began to cut vertically along the fingernail into the flesh. This wasn't a fake nail, it was clearly cutting off the entire nail. The scissors cut into the flesh bit by bit, and the pain intensified. At first, it was relatively easy, but later on, when the scissors came into contact with the flesh and the fingernail, it wasn't so easy to cut. The attendant began to cut with force, and the blade directly pierced through the flesh and the fingernail, cutting through the entire nail. Uncle Cheng was in so much pain that his eyes widened, and his whole body was filled with blood. However, this was far from the most painful moment. Everything had just begun. After the servant cut a crack in the thumbnail, he cut along the crack to the left and right. In the end, the entire thumbnail was cut off, leaving only a bloody mess. This was only the first fingernail, there were still 19 more. The attendant didn't give Uncle Cheng any breathing room, and cut off the fingernails one by one. When the attendant cut off the last 3 toes, Uncle Cheng finally looked at Ning Ching. He widened his eyes and stared fixedly. There was no pleading, no resentment, nothing. He just stared fixedly. Ning Ching let him stare, expressionless. When the attendant cut off all the toes and began to cut off the fingers, Uncle Ching finally couldn't stand it anymore. He looked at Ning Ching, and tears flowed out of his eyes. Unfortunately, Ning Ching was still indifferent, and didn't even say a word. The 10 fingers were connected to the heart, and cutting off fingernails was far more painful than cutting off toenails. Uncle Cheng was in so much pain that his whole body trembled, and tears streamed down his face. Jun Xia looked at this scene with great interest. Only today did he realize how cruel and ruthless Ning Ching was. He felt a little regretful. If he had met Ning Ching earlier, perhaps they wouldn't have come to this point. Perhaps they would have cooperated long ago. After the fingernails were cut off one by one, Uncle Cheng was in so much pain that he almost fainted. He lay on the torture board in a daze, and was in despair. Jun Xia lazily got up from his seat, and said with a smile, "Ning Ching, the show is over. Let's talk about our cooperation, right? I want to kill him myself." Ning Ching looked at the unconscious Uncle Cheng, and his eyes shot out a terrifying hatred. Jun Xia shrugged, and very generously said, "Of course." With a glance, the soldier immediately stepped forward and released Ning Ching. Ning Ching looked around, as if looking for a weapon. "Here, use this prince's sword." Jun Xia generously handed over the treasured sword. Just how sincere was he to cooperate with Ning Ching? Ning Ching walked over expressionlessly, took Jun Xia's treasured sword, and turned to face Uncle Cheng. Chapter 1073. The moment Ning Ching charged out, he was stopped by the poison guards. He didn't know what poison he had been poisoned with, but he immediately lost all his strength and fell to his knees. Not long after he fell to his knees, he lost all his strength and fainted on the ground. "Detoxify him, keep him alive." Jun Xia roared at the unconscious Ning Ching. He was so angry that his eyes had turned scarlet, and he looked like a crazy demon. He had given Ning Ching so many chances, and he had sincerely wanted to cooperate with him. Why? Why did Ning Ching have to play with him again and again? What was so good about Han Yunxi, that pair of broken shoes? Why did Ning Ching have to be so loyal? Why would such a vicious and merciless man give up power and glory for a woman? Jun Xia couldn't understand, and he didn't want to think about it anymore. He roared angrily, "You want to die together with me, right? All right, Ning Ching, this prince will fulfill your wish. Just you wait, this prince will definitely make Han Yunxi accompany you in death. Definitely." Jun Xia was already injured, and with such an agitated roar, he couldn't stand it all. He took 2 steps back and fell to the ground. However, he was still unwilling to give up and was unable to calm down. He glared at Ning Ching and roared again, "Ning Ching, this prince will definitely make you regret it. I will definitely make you regret your choice. Definitely." As soon as Junixia finished speaking, he lost all strength in his body and collapsed to the ground. The wound in his abdomen was very, very serious. Even though he pressed down on the wound, fresh blood still flowed out, drenching his clothes and pooling on the ground. This was probably the biggest blow in his life. If that was the case, the first time was because he was stupid and was deceived by Ningqing, then the second time would be because he was useless. So, in this situation, Ningqing would rather take the risk and choose to die together with him than to cooperate with him. They are all liars, he said word by word. Bai Yanqing, Bai Yuqiao, and Ningqing were all liars. Junixia looked up at the sky and suddenly sneered. His smile was cruel and determined. As he laughed, he slowly closed his eyes and fainted. The surrounding guards panicked and didn't know what to do. Hao San hurriedly ran over to support him as he shouted, "Doctor! Get a doctor, quick! Someone, quickly get the doctor here, quickly!" When Junixia woke up, the wound on his abdomen had already been treated. He had only moved a little when pain came from the wound. It was as if the wound had been torn apart. When Hao San, who was pouring out medicine, saw that his master had woken up, he hurriedly ordered someone to call the doctor over. "Master, don't move. Don't move." Hao San hurriedly ran over and held Junixia. "It's just a minor injury. Why are you making such a fuss?" Junixia asked unhappily. Hao San's face was anxious. "Master, this isn't a minor injury. The doctor said that the wound is very deep. If it was any deeper, it would have pierced through. There's no way to save it." Junixia coldly glared at him and insisted on getting off the bed. But when he sat up, the wound immediately began to bleed. "Master! This servant is begging you. Just lie down properly. If something were to happen to you, wouldn't that be Ning Chang's intention?" Hao San anxiously advised. Junixia also didn't expect that he would be injured so seriously. He lay back down and stared blankly at the smear of blood on his abdomen. At this time, the doctor came over. When he saw the smear of blood, the doctor was anxious, but he didn't dare to say anything bad about Junixia. He could only quickly reapply the blood and bandage the wound. Junixia didn't move or say a word, as if he was in a daze. After the doctor finished treating the wound, he asked coldly, "How long will it take for this wound to heal?" "This servant is incompetent. His Highness the Duke of Kong won't be able to get off the bed for at least 3 days. For the next 10 days, he will need to change the dressing every 2 days. The bleeding will completely stop after 15 days. After a month, he will be allowed to move about normally." The doctor replied fearfully. Junixia waved his hand to dismiss the doctor. He asked Hao San, "Where's Ningqing?" "He's imprisoned in the prison. The poison from the poison guards has been neutralized." Hao San hesitated for a moment, then asked, "Master, should we send the antidote today?" The antidote for the poison that Junixia gave Ningqing had to be taken daily. Otherwise, he would definitely die within the time it takes to burn a stick of incense. This antidote was in Junixia's hands. Even Hao San didn't have it. This was also the biggest reason why Ningqing couldn't escape and could only perish together with Junixia. "Send it over." Junixia took out the antidote without hesitation. He was originally gloomy and cold, but at this moment, his entire person became even colder. "Serve him well. Han Yinshi hasn't arrived yet, so he can't die." Hao San hurriedly took the antidote and rushed to the secret prison. Junixia summoned the soldiers and instructed them in a low voice, "Send all the archers that can be sent to this prince. Also, send all the gunpowder in the army over. This matter must be kept confidential." "Yes." The soldiers immediately obeyed and went to carry out the orders. After Jun Yixia lost his temper became even stranger. He didn't look at Ningqing again. Instead, he had Hao Sen deliver the antidote to Ningqing on time every day. As he recuperated, he redeployed the defenses of Tiger's prison. At the same time, he constantly sent people to investigate the whereabouts of Ningjing and the others. No one knew that the mysterious man who could control the tiger was the greatest fear hidden in the depths of his heart. If there came a day when he found out that the person who could control the white tiger he tamed was Deacon Jean, how would he feel? In fact, Deacon Jean was still hiding in this dense mountain forest and hadn't left Tiger's prison. It wasn't because of anything else, but because Deacon Jean was seriously injured and still hadn't woken up. The dense grass covered the entrance of the cave. If one didn't look carefully, even if they walked to the entrance of the cave, no one would know that there was a tiger's den hidden behind the grass and trees. The inside of the cave was dusky. Deacon Jean was unconscious on the ground, and the only remaining white tiger was quietly guarding by his side. Mu Ling was hugging a baby in swaddling clothes as she leaned against the wall and dozed off. She was thin and weak to begin with, and the torment of the past few days made her even more haggard. Not to mention that she had lost a lot of weight, her face was very pale, and there were large dark circles under her eyes. Even that pair of big, clear eyes had lost their spirit. She was very sleepy, but she still hugged the baby tightly. This baby in swaddling clothes was Ningjing and Tang Li's daughter. Her parents weren't around, so Mu Ling made her own decision and gave her a nickname, Tang Tang. She hoped that this baby would be able to reunite with her parents one day and smile as sweet as honey. Mu Ling dozed off and unknowingly fell asleep. But soon, her brows furrowed, and her face gradually filled with horror. She once again dreamed of the scene on the day of their escape. That day, Bai Yuqiao and the unconscious Ning Jing rode on a white tiger together, and Su Xiaoyu rode on another one. After they fought their way out of the encirclement, they escaped first. She and Deacon Jean quickly caught up with them. However, when they escaped into the dense forest, they suddenly encountered a very terrifying man in black. She didn't know what the man in black did, but the white tiger behind them suddenly fell down and turned into a pool of blood in an instant. They were frightened, and Jean Zi told everyone to escape separately. However, before they could separate, the man in black flew towards her and Jean Zi, wanting to snatch the baby. Almost at the same time, the two tigers that Bai Yuqiao and Su Xiaoyu rode on turned into a pool of blood. Just when she and Jean Zi were in despair, Bai Yuqiao suddenly threw himself at the man in black and hugged him tightly, telling them to escape. Jean Zi didn't care about Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu, and took her and the baby to escape into the depths of the dense forest. She didn't have time to answer. Until now, she didn't know whether Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu had successfully escaped, and she didn't know whether Bai Yuqiao was alive or dead. She couldn't imagine if she, Jean Zi, and the baby in her hands were caught by the man in black. Would they turn into a pool of blood like those tigers? Jean Zi didn't dare to be careless. Seeing that the man in black didn't chase after them, he let the white tiger run to the right, and he took her and the baby to the left. In the end, she couldn't run anymore, so Jean Zi carried her and the baby on his back. He was almost running with his life. When they ran to the tiger's den, Jean Zi put her and the baby down and was unconscious until now. Mu Ling knew that there was a way to die, which was called exhaustion. However, she never thought that the person beside her would be in such a situation. She was frightened and guarded Jean Zi all day long. Every once in a while, she would check his pulse, fearing that he would really die from exhaustion. Little Tang Tang was hungry and cried all day long. She didn't know what to do. She couldn't be sure whether the man in black was still looking for them. She was almost desperate, but the big white tiger actually found them and brought a tigress that had just given birth. In desperation, she could only let little Tang Tang eat tiger milk. The starving little Tang Tang was really like a mother with milk. She wasn't afraid of the tigress, and after a few days, she was especially close to the tigress. As if she was frightened by the big white tiger, the tigress was especially protective of little Tang Tang and was respectful to her. Mu Ling was cautious after all. After several days of observation, she was sure that the tigress wasn't hostile. Only then did she dare to let little Tang Tang sleep next to the tigress. With the tigress helping her comfort little Tang Tang, she had time to take care of Jean Zi. Although the big white tiger bit a lot of herbs, it didn't affect Jean Zi's injury much. After staying in the tiger's den for 3 days, she sneaked out to pick herbs. She didn't dare to go far, so she stayed near the cave. Suddenly, Mu Ling screamed, "Run! Sister Jing, run! Run! Woo woo, big Sister Jing, hurry up and run! You can't die, you haven't seen Tang Li yet. Sister Jing, hurry up and run! Tang Tang, where is Tang Tang? Give Tang Tang back to Sister Jing. Give Tang Tang back to Sister Jing." Mu Ling's face was covered in tears from her dream, waking up the 2 tigers beside her. The tigress was about to wake her up, but suddenly stopped and turned to look at the white tiger. She saw that the big white tiger had gotten up and was devoutly prostrating beside Deacon Jean. Deacon Jean had opened his eyes and was awake. The tigress immediately turned around and prostrated with the big white tiger, bowing their heads. Deacon Jean silently sat up and gently stroked the big white tiger's head. He couldn't help but frown when he saw Mu Ling crying from a nightmare. He was about to wake her up when Mu Ling suddenly cried miserably. "Chi brother! Chi brother, where are you? Chi brother, don't you want Ling anymore? Chi brother, where are you? Chi brother! Mu Ling misses you so much." Chapter 1074. What was Mu Ling dreaming of that made her cry and shout, "Chi brother"? What did she need Gu for? To save her. Deacon Jean had wanted to wake Mu Ling up, but when he heard the words, "Chi brother," he stopped moving. Just like that, he sat there quietly, looking at her tear-streaked face, looking at her terrified little face, listening to her cry. She called out, "Chi Gij," again and again. What was so good about Gu? Suddenly, Deacon Jean muttered. He said, "Mu Ling, how about I take you back to Eastwu?" He said, "Mu Ling, forget everything. Let's change our names and go to Eastwu to herd sheep and horses, okay?" He said, "Mu Ling, what's so good about you?" He had spent so much effort and almost lost his life. He should have taken her to exchange the indenture contract with Han Yunshi and then left alone to return to Winter Crow Country. But damn it, he didn't even want the indenture contract and just wanted to take her away. Mu Ling was dreaming deeply and crying sadly, but even so, she still hugged little Tang Tang tightly and didn't let go. She wasn't the child's mother, but protecting the child had become an instinct. She wouldn't let go easily even in her dreams. Finally, the sleeping child was awakened. At first she was sobbing, but then she cried louder and louder. Mu Ling woke up abruptly and almost let go of the child. Fortunately, she hugged her tightly in time. She didn't even realize that Deacon Jean had woken up and was sitting not far away, staring at her. She exhaled and muttered to herself, "You scared me to death." She quickly hugged little Tang Tang tightly and pressed her face against the baby's swaddling clothes. She seemed to be comforting little Tang Tang, but she was actually looking for comfort and courage from little Tang Tang. If it wasn't for the fact that little Tang Tang needed her protection, she would have broken down a long time ago. Until now, she still couldn't imagine the safety of Ning Jing and Bai Yuqiao. Were they safe or in danger? Don't cry, Tang Tang. Mother will be back soon. Little Tang Tang, be a good girl and don't cry. Mother will be back soon. Godmother won't lie. Little Tang Tang, be good. Daddy is coming to save us. Don't cry. As a mother, she had to be strong. Even if she wasn't a mother, she still had to be strong. Mu Ling comforted her in a low voice. Then, she comforted little Tang Tang as if she was comforting herself. Little Tang Tang had stopped crying, but her face was still full of tears. Deacon Jean originally wanted to let Mu Linger discover that he was awake first, but he really couldn't stand it anymore. This brat was clearly still like a child herself. Why did she have to pretend to be so mature? She made it seem as if that child was really hers. Mu Linger. Deacon Jean suddenly said in a cold voice. Mu Linger suddenly looked up and immediately saw Deacon Jean sitting in front of her with a gloomy face. When did this guy wake up? She was stunned and couldn't speak for a long time. Are you stupid? Why are you comforting the child? Wipe your tears first. Deacon Jean reprimanded unhappily. Mu Linger quickly ran over with the child in her arms. She looked at Deacon Jean in disbelief. You finally woke up. As soon as she came closer, Deacon Jean immediately found that she was a lot more haggard. Her complexion was very, very bad. How long had he been unconscious? How long had she been in this cave? How did she get through these days? Thinking of these questions, his brows furrowed even tighter. Mu Linger looked deeply at Deacon Jean. She quickly put little Deacon Jean aside and reached out to pinch Deacon Jin's cheeks. It hurts. Deacon Jean cried out in pain, but his hands didn't move. He didn't push her away. Mu Linger, are you stupid? What are you doing? Unexpectedly, Mu Linger burst into tears. She cried even louder than little Tang Tang just now. Sob sob. Jeanzi, I'm not dreaming. You're finally awake. You're finally awake. You scared me, do you know that? I thought you would never wake up again. I don't know what to do. Sob sob. Jeanzi, you're finally awake. Sob sob. As soon as Mu Linger started crying, little Tang Tang immediately burst into tears. Mu Linger then realized that she had lost her composure. She immediately shut her mouth and hurriedly hugged little Tang Tang. Unexpectedly, just as she turned around, Deacon Jean suddenly pulled her into his arms. Mu Linger was dumbfounded, however, she quickly struggled. What are you doing? Let go of me. Don't move. Jeanzi ordered fiercely. How could Mu Linger be frightened by him? She struggled even more. Let go of me. She's crying. Let go of me. Otherwise, I won't be polite. As long as you keep quiet, she won't cry. Manager Jin's grip was strong enough for Mu Linger to struggle out of his grip. Mu Linger wanted to explain, but Deacon Jean continued, you scared her to tears. You're a crybaby yourself. Why would you be afraid of her crying? Mu Linger was speechless. In the end, she could only say, let go of me. Faced with her words, Deacon Jean was speechless. He didn't let go. Instead, he hugged Mu Linger even tighter. Mu Linger struggled a few times, but in the end, she could only give in. What surprised her was that little Tang Tang actually stopped crying. Mu Linger was not used to being hugged for too long. She was also flustered and had an indescribable feeling. She said very seriously, Jeanzi, men and women shouldn't touch each other. You're taking advantage of me. You can't do this. Don't forget what you owe me. Deacon Jean replied coldly. She still owed him a night of company. How was a hug taking advantage of him? Who knew that Mulinger would go back on her word? Go tell on us to Junie Xie right now. As soon as she said that, the grip around her waist tightened. It was so tight that Mulinger felt pain. However, Mulinger didn't have anything on Deacon Jean, so she wasn't afraid of him. She was very stubborn and firm. Jeanzi, I don't owe you anything. Let me tell you, if you want to get back the indenture agreement from my sister, let go of me immediately. From now on, keep a distance of 3 steps from me. Otherwise, my sister and brother-in-law won't let you off. Mulinger warned sternly. Deacon Jean was unmoved. He leaned over and said mildly in her ear, I don't want the indenture agreement. I only want you. As soon as he said that, Mulinger froze. You. Are you kidding? Who are you kidding? Mulinger, we agreed that if I saved you from Tiger's prison, you would return to Winter Crow Country with me. Are you going back on your word? Deacon Jean asked again. Mulinger remembered that Deacon Jean had said that before. However, she thought that he was just boasting out of boredom. How would she know that he was so capable that he could control a tiger? Mulinger was stunned. She knew that this wasn't a dream, but she felt that she was dreaming. A dream that she didn't know if it was a nightmare. She knew that Deacon Jean liked her, but she didn't know why Deacon Jean liked her. When did he like her? Deacon Jean should hate her. Are you coming with me? Deacon Jean asked again. We have to find Sister Jing and the rest first. Otherwise, what about little Deacon Jean? Mulinger found an excuse to avoid Deacon Jin's question. It wasn't that she didn't want to refuse, but she didn't dare to. This guy was hugging her and burying his head in her shoulder. If she angered him, she wouldn't be able to answer even if she called for help in this wilderness. Mulinger finally became a little more cautious, but Deacon Jin's words made her despair. Deacon Jin said, take the child away and never have any contact with them. That's my bottom line. Mulinger couldn't stand it anymore and rebuked angrily, Jean Z, you stole someone else's child. Don't you have any shame? You're bullying such a small child. What's the difference between you and that big bastard Junie Xie? Are you coming or not? Deacon Jean was impatient. He had no interest in Ning Jing and Tang Li's daughter at all. Such a small child, and a girl at that, couldn't be bought for much at the slave market. He didn't want to have any contact with Han Yunxi and the rest because once Han Yunxi and the rest found out that Mulinger was in his hands, he reckoned that he would be caught even if he fled to the ends of the earth. Mulinger was too naive and didn't understand her sister at all. With Han Yunxi's temper and ambition, if she knew that he knew the art of animal taming, how could she let him go so easily? He had been pondering about his relationship with Junie Xia from the Black Clan and how he got his animal taming skills. Although he was curious, he wasn't interested in finding out. He didn't want to get involved in the battle between the 7 aristocrats and the Eastern and Western Qin royal family. He just wanted to go back to his hometown. Changing his name and disappearing from the world was the safest and most peaceful choice. Mulinger thought for a long time and asked sincerely, Jean Z, can I think about it? If Mulinger became cunning, then it must be because she was forced to follow Jean Z. She thought that this place wasn't far from Tiger's Den and it was already summer. Han Yunxi should be coming to save them. Perhaps, Han Yunxi and the rest would be here in a few days. At that time, she would teach Jean Z a lesson. Okay. I'll give you 3 days. Deacon Jean let go of Mulinger. Mulinger secretly sighed in relief and didn't bargain with Deacon Jean. She wanted to wait for 3 days and then ask for 3 more days from him. Anyway, she would stall for as long as she could. Besides, they might not be able to escape from this forest. That mysterious person and Dreamy must still be looking for them everywhere. Linger hurriedly picked up little Tang Tang and realized that the big white tiger and the tigress were looking at her strangely. When she looked over, the 2 tigers actually lowered their heads and were especially respectful. Without a doubt, Deacon Jin's hug just now made the 2 tigers think that Linger was their mistress. Linger pursed her lips and pretended not to see it. Deacon Jin also turned his head away and pretended not to know anything. Wouldn't the 2 tigers feel awkward? The 2 of them didn't speak and the cave quieted down. For some reason, the atmosphere suddenly became awkward. In the end, it was Linger who spoke first. Jin Z, where did you come from? How can you control these tigers? Talent. After hearing a lot of tiger roar, I knew what they meant. Later on, I tried a few times and found that they were all afraid of me. I secretly taught them a few times and they all listened to me. Deacon Jin said it casually as if it was just a very ordinary thing. He definitely didn't know how much time and effort Dreamy spent to train these tigers. I don't believe it. Linger looked at him suspiciously. However, Deacon Jin didn't want to talk about it. No one is forcing you to believe it. Linger simply stopped asking and turned her head to look to the side. At this time, the big white tiger suddenly stood up. Deacon Jin thought that it had sensed danger outside the cave. Who knew that it actually kept wagging its tail at Linger? Linger then remembered something and smiled. Jin Z, it's time for you to take your medicine. Take medicine. He had been unconscious all this time. How could he take medicine? Chapter 1075. Deacon Jin had been unconscious for the past few days. How did he take the medicine? If there was a pre-boiled medicine, Linger could have pried open his mouth and forced it down his throat. However, the problem was that there were no utensils in the cave that could be used to boil medicine. How was she going to boil it? A trace of suspicion flashed across Deacon Jin's eyes. He looked around before his gaze finally landed on Linger. He was waiting to see how Linger would feed him the medicine. Linger immediately walked to the side. In a corner not far away, there was a pile of herbs that had been freshly picked and dried. There were also some wild fruits. Linger didn't dare to wander around outside every day. She usually went out once every 2 or 3 days and came back with a pile of herbs and wild fruits. The herbs were for Manager Jean, while the wild fruits were for her to satisfy her hunger. Fortunately, she didn't have a big appetite and preferred vegetarian food. If it were an ordinary person, they wouldn't be able to survive after eating so many wild fruits for so many days. As soon as Linger walked over, Big White Tiger immediately followed her and squatted beside the pile of herbs with Linger. Linger chose carefully for a while before picking out a bunch of herbs. There were 1 or 2 of each type, and 7 or 8 types made a large pile. Deacon Jin didn't notice that Big White Tiger was sticking close to Linger. He looked at her back and seemed to be thinking about something. Unconsciously, he bit his lip lightly. He only came back to his senses when Linger turned and walked towards him. Seeing that there were so many herbs in her hands, he was really puzzled. He couldn't understand how this girl was handling these raw herbs. However, he didn't say a word and didn't bat an eyelid. Unexpectedly, Linger directly handed over a large pile of herbs. Here, these are the herbs you need to take. Deacon Jin's hands hung by his sides as he gently clenched his fists. He asked, "How do I take them?" "Just eat like this," Linger said seriously. "What's this?" Deacon Jean also became serious. Eat it raw. Chew it up and swallow it, Mu Linger replied. Deacon Jin's serious face finally showed some expression. He sneered and said, Mu Linger, you still have the mood to joke with me. You seem to be in a good mood. Mu Linger didn't like Deacon Jin's disdainful gaze. In his eyes, she seemed to be worthless. She really couldn't understand. Since Deacon Jean despised her so much, why would he pester her and not let her go? Sincerity was also required to pester someone. Just like how she pestered Chi Brother, she was full of sincerity. She had never despised Chi Brother. As long as it was something Chi Brother said or did, she liked it all. Even if Chi Brother didn't say or do anything and just stood there, she still liked him. If you like someone, shouldn't you like everything about him with all your heart? What kind of liking was Deacon Jean? The more Mu Linger thought about it, the more depressed she became. She coldly looked back at him and replied loudly, Jean Z, are you blind? Can't you see that there's no medicine furnace or fire here? Tell me, if I don't chew these medicines raw, how am I supposed to eat them? Don't tell me you want to suffer for a few hours to extract the essence before drinking them. Deacon Jin's expression became even more strange. Mu Linger continued, these medicines are only beneficial to you. Take them or leave them. Mu Linger didn't care if Deacon Jean took them or not. She stuffed a large handful of medicinal ingredients into his arms and turned to leave. Deacon Jean caught the medicinal ingredients with one hand and pulled Mu Linger's hand with the other. Wait! Can you stop being so touchy? Mu Linger shook off his hand. Deacon Jean didn't pull her again and let Mu Linger walk to the side. Mu Linger picked up little Tang Tang from the tiger's side and sat down against the wall. Little Tang Tang was too young and spent far more time sleeping than awake. At this moment, she had already fallen asleep again. Perhaps it was because she had drunk the tigress milk, but her complexion was particularly good. Her rosy cheeks made her look even more beautiful and delicate, making people want to kiss and pinch her. Mu Linger looked at little Tang Tang, and no matter how bad her mood was, it would immediately brighten up. She couldn't help but think about how happy Tang Li would be if he knew that Sister Jing had given birth to a daughter for him. She couldn't help but think about how this little girl would look like when she grew up and how many men would adore her. She also thought about how much trouble Sister Jing would have to face in the Tang sect in the future if she only had this daughter. Mu Linger was immersed in her own thoughts and didn't know that Deacon Jean had been staring at her. His gaze was even more complicated than before. Deacon Jean seemed to be hesitating about something. After a long time, he spoke again. He said, Mu Linger, when I was unconscious, this medicine, how did I take it? I chewed it up and forced it down. Mu Linger answered casually. Her attention was on little Tang Tang. Deacon Jean obviously knew that the medicine was chewed up and forced down, but he wanted to ask who chewed it up. Actually, this was a question that didn't need to be asked. Mu Linger was the only one in the cave. Other than Mu Linger chewing up the medicine, could it have been two tigers? Deacon Jean looked at Mu Linger's calm reaction, and a trace of suspicion flashed through his eyes. He said, oh, and didn't ask any more questions. He sat down opposite Mu Linger and leaned against the wall. Just like that, the two of them quieted down again. Mu Linger looked at little Tang Tang, entranced and lost in thought. Although the big white tiger wasn't very clear about what had happened, it could feel its master's anger, so it also obediently crawled down. For the next half of the day, Deacon Jean stared at Mu Linger coldly. Mu Linger braced herself and let him stare, but in the end, she couldn't take it anymore. She glared at him and said angrily, what are you looking at? I don't have any other way to feed you medicine. If you don't take the medicine, your life will be in danger. Don't you know how to chew? Deacon Jean suddenly asked loudly. Isn't it just as disgusting? Mu Linger retorted loudly. It's not the same. Deacon Jean roared. Mu Linger didn't know if it was because she was shocked by his anger or because she was shocked by the words, it's not the same. She pursed her lips and stared at him blankly, not retorting anymore. The two of them were silent for a long time before speaking at the same time. Mu Linger. Jean Z. Neither of them was angry or fierce. Both of them were especially calm. You first. You first. They spoke at the same time again. They were clearly letting the other party speak first, but they didn't give in. Hence, they bumped into each other again. He said, Mu Linger, I like you. She said, Jean Z, don't like me. Hence, the two of them fell silent. After a long while, Mu Linger asked helplessly, what do you like about me? What's so good about me? Deacon Jean said coldly, what do you like about Gu? What's so good about him? The two of them were still rather calm at first, but when they heard this, Mu Linger was furious. What happened between me and Chi brother has nothing to do with you. Stop talking nonsense. What could happen between you and Gu? Deacon Jean asked again. His words made Mu Linger speechless. That's right, what could possibly happen between her and Chi Gij? Nothing had ever happened between them, Jean Z, I'll only like Chi brother for the rest of my life. Before Mu Linger could finish speaking, Deacon Jean flew out of the cave. He didn't listen, but Mu Linger continued. Perhaps she was saying it for herself. She said, I won't like you. Never. That night, Jean Z went to hunt a bunch of game and even found a pile of firewood to start a fire. Although he ignored Mu Linger, he still threw the first roasted pheasant to Mu Linger to eat. Mu Linger had been craving for it for a long time. She didn't pretend to refuse, but ate it with relish. She was really too hungry. Coldly, Deacon Jean glanced at her. It was 70% heartache and 30% helplessness. After Deacon Jean woke up, Mu Linger's food finally improved. They hid in the cave and lived day by day. 3 days passed quickly. Deacon Jean didn't mention going to Winter Crow Country again. Mu Linger also pretended to forget to give him an answer. Mu Linger hoped that reinforcements would come quickly. Deacon Jean didn't tell her that there were countless elite soldiers lying in ambush in the forest. It was very dangerous. They couldn't get out at all. This information was conveyed by the tigers outside. He knew about it when he went hunting for the first time. Deacon Jean was also waiting. He was waiting for Han Yunxi and the others to break through Jun Yixie's defense line. However, it wasn't just Deacon Jean and Jun Yixie. There was another person in the forest who had been waiting for a long time. Chapter 1076. Other than Jun Yixie and Deacon Jean, there was also Bai Yanqing who had been waiting for Han Yunxi and Long Fei Ye's arrival. He had been waiting since the beginning of spring. What he had been waiting for was not Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi, but a piece of bad news. Han Yunxi, Long Fei Yi, Gu, and Gu Beiyue did not come to save them, nor did they go north. Instead, they went to Heaven Mountain. Not only did they save Elder Kenzo and the 2 seniors, they also defeated the people from Evil Sword School. The Evil Sword School was basically destroyed, leaving only the Evil Sword Pavilion. Whether it was Tianshan Kenzo or the Evil Sword Sect, Bai Yanqing did not care about them. What he wanted was the Ganjiang treasure sword. Now that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi knew the secret of the failure of dual cultivation, they also knew the secret of the phoenix power. His plan had failed once again. What he did not expect was that Gu actually controlled Mo Xie's sword spirit. When did Gu obtain Immerse's sword spirit? Before Immerse's sword spirit was reforged, what could Gu use to control Immerse's sword spirit? Once he had the Ganjiang treasure sword and Immerse's sword, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's dual cultivation would definitely succeed. Once Long Fei Yi truly controlled the lustbite power, he would be in danger. No matter what, he would not allow this to happen. Master, wasn't the Ganjiang treasure sword locked back? Long Fei Yi can't even control the Ganjiang treasure sword. Why do we have to worry so much? The one who spoke was a black-clothed and masked servant. Bai Yanqing said coldly, as long as the lustbite power and phoenix power work together, we can definitely subdue any ancient treasure sword. There's no way those old fogies from Tianshan don't know about this. What Bai Yanqing regretted the most was that he had not killed those old bastards from Sky Mountain. Although the news from Sky Mountain was that the Ganjiang sword had been sealed, who knew if this was a ploy by Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi? After hearing his master's words, the masked servant didn't say anything else. We can't let them forge Immerse's sword, we can't. Bai Yanqing, who had been calm all this time, finally became anxious. Originally, he wanted to have some fun with Han Yunxi and Long Fei, but once his life was in danger, he wouldn't give them any more time. Get Duanmu Yao to hurry over. Old man wants to have a good chat with Jun Yixia. Bai Yanqing said seriously. Jun Yixia occupied such a good location in Tiger's prison and had Ningqing as a hostage. He also had 2 hostages in his hands and the 3rd venerable sage in Duanmu Yao's hands. These advantages were enough for him to force Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi into a dead end. Even if he couldn't stop the dual cultivation, he would still force them to kill each other. The descendants of Eastern and Western Qin had to bear an eternal hatred. How could they be together? He didn't capture Mulinger and Jin Zi, but luckily he captured Su Xiaoyu. In his eyes, Su Xiaoyu was more valuable than any of them. There were individual iron cells in the pavilion, and Su Xiaoyu was locked up in the most secluded cell. From the time he kidnapped her until now, Bai Yanqing would come over every day to chat with her. Today, he was still the same as usual, lighting a lantern and hanging it in front of the iron cell before sitting down cross-legged. Su Xiaoyu sat in the cell, her entire body tensed up by the iron chains, unable to move. Even if she wanted to sleep, she could only sleep sitting up. Little girl, you just have to answer Grandpa's question. Grandpa promises to let you go. Bai Yanqing's tone was always kind. This little girl had been tortured by Bai Yuqiao for so long, but she didn't reveal any secrets. He knew that even if he beat her to death, she wouldn't reveal a single word. For this little girl who was amenable to coaxing but not coercion, he needed to be patient. Actually, Su Xiaoyu was very afraid of Bai Yanqing. She closed her eyes, not letting herself look at him. If she didn't look, perhaps she wouldn't be afraid, right? But when she closed her eyes, the scene of them escaping and being ambushed immediately appeared. Jin Zi protected Mulinger and the child as they escaped. Bai Yuqiao tightly hugged Bai Yanqing, wanting her and Ning Jing to escape. She and Ning Jing had no chance to escape. Because Bai Yanqing poisoned Bai Yuqiao. She and Ning Jing watched as Bai Yuqiao slowly melted from head to toe, like a snowman slowly melting, finally turning into a pool of blood. She would never forget the look in Bai Yuqiao's eyes when he looked at her before he died. It was so sad and so reluctant to part. She couldn't understand Bai Yuqiao's eyes, but she always felt that Bai Yuqiao had something to say to her, but he didn't have time to say it. These days, she had been pondering and thinking. But she really didn't understand, not at all. Bai Yuqiao saved them because he had an agreement with Ning Qing. It was just a transaction. Facing death, shouldn't it be regret and unwillingness? What was Bai Yuqiao reluctant to part with her? She repeatedly comforted herself that she must have seen wrongly and misunderstood. But every time she closed her eyes, the scene of Bai Yuqiao turning into a pool of blood unconsciously appeared in her mind. Bai Yuqiao's bright and lively big eyes also appeared. She even had a feeling that she was looking at herself. She didn't have a good impression of Bai Yuqiao. Even if Bai Yuqiao saved them, she still didn't like him. But now, she especially wanted to know what agreement Bai Yuqiao had with Ning Jing. How important was it that Bai Yuqiao would betray Jun Yixia and Bai Yanqing? Girl, think about it carefully. Bai Yanqing asked again. Su Xiaoyu still ignored him. Her brows were tightly knitted. She wanted to get rid of the pair of eyes in her mind, but she couldn't. Girl, how about this? Grandpa will play a game with you. Bai Yanqing smiled and said, Grandpa will give you 10 days to think about it. If you don't think about it in a day, Grandpa will pull out one of Ning Jing's teeth. If you don't think about it in 10 days, Grandpa will pull out 10 of Ning Jing's teeth. Tell me, isn't it fun? Lunatic. Su Xiaoyu suddenly roared. Bai Yanqing's lips curled into a cold smile. Looks like it will be fun. Someone, bring me a pair of pliers. Seeing Bai Yanqing stand up, Su Xiaoyu immediately surrendered. I'll talk. I'll tell you everything I know. You have to promise me one thing. Bai Yanqing was very satisfied. What is it? Tell me. Bring Ning Jing here and lock her up with me. Also, I want 2 warm beds and 3 hot meals a day. Su Xiaoyu said seriously. Ning Jing had just given birth and had been tormented until now. Even if she didn't die, she was half dead. If she let Bai Yanqing pull out another tooth, she would definitely lose her life. She could see that Bai Yanqing wouldn't hurt her. Instead, he planned to use Ning Jing to threaten her. No matter what, she had to try her best to save Ning Jing's life. Bai Yanqing laughed. Little girl, what right do you have to negotiate with old man? You can either promise me or just kill us. Su Xiaoyu glared fiercely at Bai Yanqing. Old thing, it's easy to kill people, but it's not easy to make people live. Don't think that we're afraid of death. Let me tell you, Ning Jing and I aren't afraid. Bai Yanqing had always heard that this girl, Su Xiaoyu, was very stubborn. Now that he had seen it for himself, he really admired her. He smiled and said, Little girl, why don't you pledge allegiance to me? I'll take you in as my disciple and teach you the art of poison. Those who become your disciples don't have good endings. Ah, forget it. Su Xiaoyu laughed wantonly. Bai Yanqing was finally annoyed. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. He was about to order someone to open the door when Su Xiaoyu said, As far as I know, after my master got the perplexing butterfly illusion, he's been looking for something. When she said this, Bai Yanqing ordered the guards to retreat. However, Su Xiaoyu said lazily, Old grandpa, let's change the game. I'll give you 2 hours. If you send Ning Jing over and give me the things I want, I'll tell you what my master is looking for. Otherwise, I'll teach you a skill. She was threatening him. Bai Yanqing said coldly, What skill? How to kill yourself. Bai Yuqiao laughed arrogantly. Although she was imprisoned, her life was still in her own hands. Bai Yanqing wanted her to live, but she could make herself die. Yes, she was threatening Bai Yanqing. Chapter 1077. Rather than saying that Bai Yanqing was being threatened by Su Xiaoyu, it was better to say that Bai Yanqing was being played by Su Xiaoyu. Bai Yanqing's eyes slowly narrowed. He had lived for more than half his life, yet he was actually being played by a stinky brat who was still wet behind the ears. Cold, he said. Fine, old man, I'd like to see how you're not going to kill yourself. After saying that, he immediately ordered, Men, bring Ning Jing over to old man. Hearing this, Su Xiaoyu became nervous. She clenched her fists tightly, but her expression remained stubborn and uncompromising. She was afraid, but fear wouldn't make people give up. Otherwise, she wouldn't have lasted until today. Actually, she didn't know anything about the perplexing butterfly illusion. She was just lying to Bai Yanqing. Therefore, she only had one path of retreat, and that was death. When a person only had one path of death, they could throw caution to the wind and be stubborn to the end. Bai Yanqing's cold and vicious gaze pierced through the darkness, shooting straight at her. Su Xiaoyu glared back, refusing to budge an inch. She didn't want to lose in terms of momentum. Soon, Ning Jing was brought over. After not seeing her for a few days, Ning Jing was so thin that she looked like she was suffering from some serious illness. Her face was so pale and haggard that it was indescribable. Her eyes were bloodshot, and it wasn't clear whether it was because she was too tired or because she had cried. If Tang Li saw her like this, Tang Li would definitely go crazy. Ning Jing was thrown at the door of the prison cell by the guards. She lay paralyzed on the ground, her sickly body seemingly unable to withstand a single blow. Once she fell, she couldn't stand up again. She saw Su Xiaoyu, and Su Xiaoyu also saw her. The two of them looked so pathetic and weak in each other's eyes, but they actually looked at each other and smiled. Only those who were truly stubborn could be so brave and magnanimous as to smile at each other. Su Xiaoyu was a little hesitant at first, but when she saw Ning Jing forcing a smile in her bloodshot eyes, her heart became even more determined. He would either die or force Bai Yanqing to compromise. Brat, old man will give you one last chance. Are you going to tell me or not? Bai Yanqing's patience was limited, especially after hearing from Su Xiaoyu that Han Yunxi was still looking for something after obtaining the perplexing butterfly illusion. This made him even more impatient. It should be known that the water of 10,000 poisons in the medicinal forest had already fallen into the hands of Han Yunxi. There was no guarantee that she would find someone else. He was very clear about the situation of Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi's dual cultivation, but he wasn't clear about the situation of perplexing butterfly illusion at all. The power of lust bite could kill him, and perplexing butterfly illusion could break his undying body. These two were what he feared the most. Yet both of them had fallen into the hands of Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi. Old thing, you don't understand human language, do you? I've already said everything clearly just now. If you don't understand human language, then I can't do anything about it. Su Xiaoyu replied impatiently. Bai Yanqing was unable to restrain his anger. He was simply angered to death. Someone come, pull out Ning Jing's teeth for me, pull them out one by one. Bai Yanqing said angrily. He had originally wanted to give Su Xiaoyu 10 days, but now it seemed that if he didn't act ruthlessly, this brat really didn't know what was good for her and didn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Su Xiaoyu looked at Ning Jing indifferently. Ning Jing was very calm. She wasn't afraid because of Bai Yanqing's words. Her daughter had already been rescued by Mu Linger. This was already the best result she could hope for. Soon, two attendants held Ning Jing up on both sides. One of the attendants fiercely pinched her chin, forcing her to open her mouth. The other attendant brought over a pair of pliers, looking for the best place to start. Ning Jing, this brat doesn't know any better. Perhaps you can persuade her. Bai Yanqing sneered. Ning Jing ignored him. She didn't struggle and directly closed her eyes. Old man, pull out your front teeth first. Bai Yanqing suddenly shouted angrily. Although he was looking at Ning Jing, he glanced at Su Xiaoyu in the cell. He thought that Su Xiaoyu would also close her eyes, but who knew that Su Xiaoyu would actually open her eyes wide and stare at Ning Jing. This was the first time that Bai Yanqing had felt this kind of frustration. He didn't want to believe that a little girl, a sickly woman, could have such strong willpower. In this world, was there really someone who wasn't afraid of death? The pliers clamped onto one of Ning Jing's front teeth. The attendant forcefully pulled and Ning Jing was in so much pain that her entire body trembled. She instinctively wanted to close her mouth. However, the attendant gripped her chin tightly, making her unable to move. The attendant kept pulling and finally loosened the root of her teeth. It had to be said, even these attendants were scared witless and their hands were trembling. Bai Yanqing was inhumanly cold-blooded. He didn't look at Ning Jing and stared at Su Xiaoyu. He didn't believe that he couldn't win against a little girl. Finally, one of her teeth was pulled out. Ning Jing's mouth was already dripping with blood. Tears slowly flowed down from the corners of her tightly shut eyes. But she didn't struggle and didn't even make a sound. Su Xiaoyu also didn't make a sound as she stared fixedly at Ning Jing. No one knew that she secretly swore in her heart, if she and Ning Jing didn't die here today, then one day, she would definitely return everything that she had seen today to Bai Yanqing. She must. Waiting for no compromise, Bai Yanqing became even more furious. Continue. Hence, the attendant pulled out Ning Jing's second tooth. Finally, at the moment when the tooth was pulled out, Ning Jing fainted from the pain. The blood on her gums didn't stop flowing. And at this moment, the corners of Su Xiaoyu's mouth also slowly flowed with blood. She had bitten her own tongue. Bai Yanqing didn't want to believe all of this. But the truth was right in front of his eyes. He looked toward Su Xiaoyu and saw Su Xiaoyu sitting in the dark prison cell. The corners of her mouth were bleeding and her expression was cold. She was even scarier than the evil children of the evil cult in Nanzhao. Bai Yanqing was stunned. Master, if you don't help them stop the bleeding, they will die. The attendant cautiously reminded. Bai Yanqing finally regained his senses and realized that Su Xiaoyu was still threatening him. Although Bai Yanqing didn't want to admit it, he had to admit that he couldn't do anything to Su Xiaoyu. If Su Xiaoyu died, he wouldn't be able to ask about the perplexing butterfly illusion anymore. Bring the medicine. There was no doctor here, so Bai Yanqing could only do it himself. He opened the door of the prison cell and wanted to first stop Su Xiaoyu's bleeding. But Su Xiaoyu actually turned her head away and refused to do so. Stinky girl, don't refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Bai Yanqing was so angry that he was about to go crazy. Su Xiaoyu's mouth was tightly shut as blood continued to flow out from the corners of her mouth. Cold eyes stared at Bai Yanqing. That gaze wasn't just threatening, it was practically provoking. Bai Yanqing had no choice but to first stop Ning Jing's bleeding. He ordered for 2 clean blankets to be brought over and placed the unconscious Ning Jing in the prison cell. At this moment, Su Xiaoyu secretly heaved a sigh of relief. She opened her mouth and vomited out a mouthful of blood. She was clearly about to faint, but she still smiled at Bai Yanqing. Her smile was especially contemptuous. Bai Yanqing clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He couldn't wait to kill this stinky girl with one punch. But he had no choice but to stop her bleeding. Bai Yanqing had never been so aggrieved in his life. A trace of viciousness flashed past his eyes. After Su Xiaoyu revealed the secret of the perplexing butterfly illusion, he would definitely teach her how to spell the word fear. Su Xiaoyu woke up before Ning Jing. Although the wound on her tongue had stopped bleeding, it was so swollen and painful that it was difficult for her to even open her mouth, let alone speak. She saw Ning Jing lying motionless under the blankets. Her body was so thin and frail that she could turn into ashes at any moment. She was scared out of her wits and hurriedly rushed over to grab Ning Jing's hand. It was as if as long as she held on to Ning Jing, she wouldn't disappear. Feeling the warmth of Ning Jing's hand, Su Xiaoyu heaved a sigh of relief. She didn't know what she would do if Ning Jing died just like that. How much meaning would there be left in her stubbornness and perseverance? After calming down, she hurriedly took Ning Jing's pulse. It was all thanks to the days she spent by her master's side and the time she spent assisting Gu Beiyue at Pillfiend Pharmacy. Not only was she skilled in poison, she had also learned many medical skills. After taking Ning Jing's pulse, Su Xiaoyu's small face sank. Ning Jing's condition was quite bad. If she didn't quickly recover, she would definitely die if this continued. However, Su Xiaoyu couldn't be anxious. If she was anxious, it would give Bai Yanqing the opportunity to threaten her again. In a situation where both sides had equal bargaining chips, threats were a test of determination and determination. Su Xiaoyu took Ning Jing's pulse again before sitting to the side. As she watched over her, she pondered about what medicinal herbs she should ask Bai Yanqing for and how to help Ning Jing's body recover in the shortest time possible. When the guard discovered that Su Xiaoyu had woken up, he immediately went to report to Bai Yanqing. Bai Yanqing immediately rushed over. "Stinky girl, old man has satisfied all your conditions. Now, shouldn't you tell me?" Bai Yanqing asked. Su Xiaoyu immediately retorted, "How did you satisfy me? Where's the hot food?" Bai Yanqing secretly took a deep breath and controlled his temper before ordering someone to bring hot food over. "I don't need anything else. Just a bowl of hot millet porridge will do," Su Xiaoyu quickly said. The attendant indeed brought over a bowl of hot millet porridge. Bai Yanqing wasn't in a hurry to ask as he watched Su Xiaoyu slowly finish eating the millet porridge. At this point, he still had this bit of patience. But who knew that after Su Xiaoyu finished eating the millet porridge, she didn't seem to have any intention of telling him about the perplexing butterfly illusion. Instead, she sat cross-legged beside Ning Jing and leaned against the wall to rest. "Stinky girl, do you really want to die?" Bai Yanqing asked coldly. "Old uncle, you haven't fulfilled the conditions that I asked for. Why are you in such a hurry?" Su Xiaoyu said calmly. "What else do you want? Don't push your luck." Bai Yanqing said angrily. "I don't want anything. I asked you to bring Ning Jing here, but you pulled out 2 of her teeth and turned her into this state. She's neither human nor ghost, and she's still unconscious. You should at least make me believe that she can still live, right?" Su Xiaoyu bargained with the gift of the gab. Seeing that Bai Yanqing was staring at her without making a sound, Su Xiaoyu said coldly, "Let's get to the point. I'll write a prescription for you to continuously supply me with medicine for half a month. Also, send me hot food for 3 meals a day. After half a month, if Ning Jing is still alive, I'll definitely tell you everything I know." The first time Bai Yanqing gave in, he was destined to be kidnapped by Su Xiaoyu. If he didn't agree, then all his previous concessions would have been wasted. "All right, half a month," he said ruthlessly. "Stinky girl, you have to know that there's a phrase in this world called living a life worse than death." Chapter 1078. With that, Bai Yanqing stormed off in a huff. Su Xiaoyu's tense nerves finally relaxed. She wasn't aware of the northern expedition, and she wasn't aware that Deacon Jean wasn't on their side. She thought that since Mu Ling had already escaped, she would definitely be able to get reinforcements. She could only pray that reinforcements would arrive soon. Otherwise, she and Ning Jing would have suffered for nothing. That day, Su Xiaoyu fed Ning Jing medicine 3 times. At night, Ning Jing finally woke up. She smiled the moment she saw Su Xiaoyu, but her two front teeth were missing, and she didn't look as pretty as before. She only realized that her front teeth were missing when she smiled. She touched them and laughed at herself. I've lost my child and even my teeth. Will the child's father not recognize me? It's a blessing that you're still alive. Su Xiaoyu was such a pragmatic child. Ning Jing smiled. She liked hearing those words. She wanted to sit up, but Su Xiaoyu quickly came over to help her. She took the opportunity to whisper, "Be careful when you speak. The walls have ears." "I know." Su Xiaoyu lowered her voice. "Miss Jing, we only have half a month. If my master comes, we'll be able to survive. If they don't come, it's hard to say." A complicated look flashed past Ning Jing's eyes. She said softly, "Don't worry. They will definitely come." Ning Jing immediately told Su Xiaoyu about the northern expedition in detail. Su Xiaoyu had heard about Ning Jing when she met Mu Ling, at Tiger's prison, but she didn't know much about it. Now that she heard Ning Jing's detailed explanation, she understood the ins and outs of the matter. Su Xiaoyu lowered her voice even more and said seriously, "Miss Jing, you really don't look good like this." Ning Jing was stunned. What did he look like now that his front teeth were gone? Su Xiaoyu quickly added, "Miss Jing, no matter what, we have to get our hands on Bai Yanqing one day. You pull out all his teeth. What do you think?" Ning Jing didn't know where Su Xiaoyu's optimism came from. However, after listening to Su Xiaoyu's words, she seemed to be looking forward to revenge. She said in a low voice, "Pulling out all his teeth is already letting him off easy. I don't have to pull it out, I use it. I'm going to ask Tang Li to make me a special drill so that I can drill all of his teeth out." As soon as he said that, Su Xiaoyu felt her teeth ache. The pain of pulling out a tooth was temporary, and it was just pain. Drilling teeth would be painful and sore. How long would it take to drill 2 rows of teeth? Even someone as ruthless as Su Xiaoyu couldn't help but gasp. She said, "Miss Jing, it's settled then. No matter what, we can't die." "Okay." Ning Jing nodded seriously. She couldn't die. For revenge, for Tang Li, and even more so for her daughter who was still in swaddling clothes and didn't know her parents. Su Xiaoyu thought of something. She said in a low voice, "Miss Jing, what agreement did Bai Yuqiao have with your brother? How could she betray Jun Yixia and join us? She didn't even want her life anymore." Ning Jing had seen Bai Yuqiao's tragic death with her own eyes. Ning Jing had clearly seen the sadness and reluctance in Bai Yuqiao's eyes before he died. She thought that Bai Yuqiao would acknowledge Su Xiaoyu as his sister. However, Bai Yuqiao still chose to leave with the secret in the end. Bai Yuqiao didn't tell the truth personally and didn't ask for Su Xiaoyu's forgiveness. How could Ning Jing say anything more? Some lies would become a mystery that could never be solved with the departure of the person. Whether it was right or wrong, as long as the person who was alive didn't feel sad, shed tears, or regret, that was more important than anything else. Even if Bai Yuqiao left forever, Su Xiaoyu still had family. She had family, Mu Ling had family, and Han Yunxi had family too. I'm puzzled too. Only Ning Qing knows. Ning Jing sighed softly. I don't know if I can see him again. They had all left Tiger's Denver. How could Jun Yixia let Ning Qing have it easy? As for Deacon Jean, time was in such a hurry. Ning Jing didn't know whether Deacon Jean saved them out of kindness or had other motives. The only thing she could comfort herself with was that the child and Mu Ling were in Deacon Jin's hands. It was 100 times better than falling into Bai Yanqing's hands. At least, Deacon Jean would go to Han Yunxi and the others to get the indenture contract. It was mid-March. The peach blossoms in the mountains were falling. Was the expedition to the north about to begin? Were Han Yunxi and the others coming? Was Tang Li coming? Could they withstand Jun Yixia's layers of traps and Bai Yanqing's schemes? Ning Jing pushed the matter to Ning Qing, so Su Xiaoyu didn't ask any further. Ning Jing and Su Xiaoyu were waiting. Deacon Jean and Mu Ling were also waiting. Even Jun Yixia and Bai Yanqing were waiting. At this moment, Han Yunxi and the others had already arrived at Three-Way Black Market. As soon as they arrived at East Origin Hall, Gu received a letter from the medicinal hut. He glanced at it, then laughed heartily. Poison girl, it's done. Let Su Donglin bring them over. Su Donglin had found Yi Shao a few days ago. Yi Shao was very willing to help Han Yunxi, so Su Donglin secretly brought Yi Shao to Medicine City to wait. They didn't know when Gu had written the letter to the medicinal hut old man, nor did they know how he had written it. Today's letter probably meant that the medicinal hut old man had agreed to lend them the celestial fire Qian furnace to forge their swords. You've done a great service, Han Yunxi said calmly. Although she had received good news, Han Yunxi wasn't happy at all. On the way back to Three-Way Black Market, she and Long Fei Yi were both in a heavy mood. It was because they had lost contact with Tiger's prison, and the situation wasn't looking good. Where's Tang Li? Long Fei Yi asked cold the moment he entered. Your Highness, Sect Master Tang has lost control of his emotions these past few days. This subordinate took the initiative to lock him in his room. Please punish him, Your Highness. The Shadow Guard reported truthfully. Long Fei Yi didn't say anything else and went to the rear courtyard. Han Yunxi and the others immediately chased after him. Just as they reached the courtyard's entrance, they heard a series of banging on the door. When they reached the courtyard, they saw that the door and windows had been reinforced with a cross. Let me out. I'm begging you, let me out. I want to save Ning Jing, I want to save my child. Let me out. When he heard Tang Li's pleading voice, Long Fei Yi suddenly stopped in his tracks. He turned his head to look elsewhere, his handsome brows tightly knitted together. Han Yunxi also stopped in her tracks, her heart clenching. Gu leaned against the door and stared at the windows. Although he wasn't as upset as Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, he wasn't as sloppy and carefree as he usually was. Even someone as calm as Gu Beiyue sighed helplessly. Gu Beiyue was about to walk over, but Long Fei Yi didn't hesitate. He ordered cold, opened the door and let him out. As soon as the shadow guard opened the door, Tang Li rushed out. His hair was disheveled, his face was full of stubble, and his eyes were swollen. He looked like a lunatic. When he saw Long Fei Yi and the others, he was stunned at first. Then, he pounced on Long Fei Yi. However, Long Fei Yi reached out and blocked Tang Li with an arm. He reprimanded coldly, "You're already a father. Why are you still acting like this?" Tang Li was angry and wanted to cry. He shouted at Long Fei Yi, "Brother, we lost contact with Tiger's Den. We lost contact with them." "I know." Long Fei Yi shouted back. "I'll give you 15 minutes to fix your face and emotions. Come with me to the D clan to negotiate and then save them. Brother, Ning Jing and the others." Tang Li wanted to continue, but Long Fei Yi cut him off sharply. "I'll wait for you here." "I won't wait for you if you're late." Tang Li was stunned for a moment. Then, he turned around and rushed into the house. As soon as Tang Li entered the house, the huge courtyard quieted down again. Although they were all very quiet, each of them knew that they were going to fight a tough battle from today onwards. No matter what Jun Yixia had prepared for them, they were only allowed to win. They were not allowed to lose. Before the time it took to brew a cup of tea was up, Tang Li emerged. He was clean-shaven, and his hair was tied into a high bun with a simple hair tie. He wore a grayish-white training suit. His sleeves and trousers were tied tightly. He looked neat and tidy. Although his face was haggard and his eyes were still a little swollen, the light in his eyes was enough to cover everything. It made him look energetic. He was finally going to save Jing Jing and the children. He had to be 120% alert. He said loudly to Long Fei Yi, "Brother, I'm ready." Tang Li's rousing spirits lifted the spirits of everyone else. "Then let's go." Long Fei Yi and the rest didn't even stop to rest before heading straight for Myriad Merchant Hall. On the way back, he had already written letters and made arrangements for the East Qin army. Meanwhile, Bailey Yuanlong and a few of his deputy generals had arrived 3 days early. They'd already discussed the details of their cooperation with the D clan twice. While the smaller issues were settled, the bigger ones were still stuck in a deadlock. Ning Nuo had received news that Long Fei Yi and the rest would arrive at Three-Way Black Market tonight, but he never expected them to come to Myriad Merchant Hall as soon as they arrived with Han Yunxi. Ning Nuo was caught off guard. After inviting Long Fei Yi and the rest to sit in the guest hall, he hurried to summon the Council of Elders, Cloud Realm Trade Consortium's representatives, and the army's representatives. Han Yunxi stopped him and asked coldly, "Ning Nuo, didn't you waste enough time last time? Do you still want to continue this time?" Before Ning Nuo could answer, Long Fei Yi slapped the table. "If the D clan isn't sincere about cooperating, then forget it. It's not like my East Qin can't take down a trifling Northernly." Ning Nuo grew anxious at these words. "Your Highness Crown Prince, my big brother and big sister are both in Jun Yixie's hands. How can I not be anxious? If there's anything, we can discuss it properly." Judging from the current situation in Northernly, the East Qin army was invincible. Moreover, the D clan had no one to help Tiger's prison. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had come to Myriad Merchant Hall in person not to give face to the D clan, but to give face to Ningqing. They wanted to do their best to maintain the cooperation between the Eastern and Western Qin factions. "We'll attack Three-Way Pass with the Ning clan troops in the vanguard. Any objections?" Long Fei Yi asked directly. This was the first problem that had resulted in a stalemate between the two armies. Three-Way Pass was a major checkpoint between Northernly, Tianning, and Western Zhou. It had always been occupied by the Northernly army. North of Three-Way Pass was Northernly territory, and beyond that was the ungoverned Three-Way battlefield. West of the Three-Way battlefield was Western Zhou territory, while east of it was Tianning territory. The Northernly army occupied Three-Way Pass, making it easy to defend and difficult to attack. Thus, whenever the three countries went to war, Northernly's cavalry would be able to gallop across the flat plains of the Three-Way battlefield to attack Western Zhou in the west and Tianning in the east. However, it wouldn't be so easy for Western Zhou or Tianning to attack Northernly. For one, the Three-Way battlefield was a flat plain that was extremely difficult to cover. For another, the Three-Way Pass was difficult to conquer. In all of history, neither Tianning or Western Zhou had ever succeeded in conquering the Three-Way Pass. Bailey Yuanlong was kind enough to offer to join forces with the Ning clan troops. However, the Ning clan head's Deputy General Xue insisted on the Bailey army attacking Three-Way Pass. He even said, Chapter 1079. Not only did Deputy General Xue want the Bailey army to take the Three-Way Pass alone, he also said that if the Bailey army couldn't even take the pass, there was no need for cooperation between the two armies. It had to be said that Deputy General Shue's plan was too good. The most difficult and crucial part of the northern expedition was the three-way pass. The three-way pass was a natural stronghold that was difficult to take. Now that they had lost contact with Tiger's prison, Jun Yixia probably didn't trust Ning Qing anymore. Thus, Jun Yixia would definitely concentrate his best troops at the three-way pass. This was the Bailey army's first time fighting in the north, and it was also their first time fighting against the Northernly army. They weren't familiar with everything. They had thrown such a hot potato to the Bailey army from the very beginning. Undoubtedly, they wanted the Bailey army to be cannon fodder. After the Bailey army became cannon fodder, the Ning clan army would provide support. First, it would be easier to take the three-way pass. Second, they would be able to show off their might and weaken the Bailey army's morale. If the two armies were sincere in cooperating, Long Feiyi wouldn't care who contributed more. However, Deputy General Shue wasn't sincere in cooperating. He was just making his own calculations. He wanted to push the Bailey army into the tiger's den, dampen their morale, and make them suffer for nothing. This kind of thinking was beneficial to himself, but more importantly, it would harm the cooperation between the two sides and affect the overall military strength and morale. Not to mention Long Feiyi, even Bailey Yuanlong wouldn't budge. Ning Nuo naturally knew about this, but he and First Elder had no way of intimidating the military. When it came to a real battle, the military's words were louder. Now that Ning Nuo was in such a difficult position, Han Yunshi wanted to kick him flying. What kind of situation was this? How could he still be so hesitant and indecisive? With their style, they would have been forced to death before they even went to save the people. Call Deputy General Shue over. Han Yunshi said coldly. Ning Nuo actually didn't care about competing for benefits. He only had one thought right now, and that was to hurry and save the people. Ning Nuo personally ran out and brought Deputy General Shue over. As soon as Deputy General Shue entered the room, he saw Long Feiyi and Han Yunshi sitting high above in the main seats. Gu Beiyue, and Tang Li sitting on the left and right respectively. He was startled and awed. Long Feiyi was just about to speak when Han Yunshi asked, Deputy General Shue, do you insist that the Bailey army attack the three-way pass alone? Deputy General Shue had long known that such a day would come. He had already thought of how to deal with it. Just as he was about to analyze the situation, Han Yunshi said coldly, cut the crap. Just answer me, yes or no. Han Yunshi stood up and said coldly, Deputy General Shue, if you insist, then this princess will officially inform your Ning family army that the cooperation between the two armies ends here. The East Qin army will be fully in charge of the northern expedition. Han Yunshi would rather have the Bailey army sacrifice a bit more than shake the army's morale because of a dispute over who would be the vanguard. What was a soldier? Taking the lead, fighting to be the vanguard no matter how difficult it was. Fighting to be the vanguard, that was what a soldier was. The battle hadn't even begun yet and they were already haggling over every ounce, scheming to see who would pay more and who would pay less. Who would receive more and who would receive less. Could this be called a soldier? I originally thought that your two armies would fight to attack the three-way pass. I never thought that you'd fight to hide. Han Yunshi sneered before suddenly reprimanding, Deputy General Shue, Long Feiyi and I don't have time to waste with you. Ning Cheng and Ning Jing don't have time to wait for you to figure things out. Fight or not, give me a straightforward answer. Deputy General Shue's face turned red from being scolded. He hardened his heart and simply expressed all his dissatisfaction, Princess, it wasn't me who schemed, it was Bailey Yuanlong who schemed first. Those 30,000 warhorses were all good horses, but their appetites were also very good and required a large amount of money to feed them. In these 2 months, the D clan's provisions were all eaten up by those warhorses. This general proposed sharing provisions with Bailey Yuanlong, but not only did Bailey Yuanlong refuse, he also humiliated this general, saying that this general was hiding the provisions and was using this opportunity to extort East Qin's provisions. Deputy General Shui became more and more aggrieved as he spoke. Princess, this general was also worried about Master Ning. If Master Ning hadn't given himself up as a hostage, the East Qin army might not have had the guts to attack the three-way pass alone. Master Ning exchanged his life for this military opportunity. If it wasn't for the fact that this general had no other choice, how could this general bear to waste it? When these words were said, Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi were both shocked. Bailey Yuanlong actually didn't report the matter of the provisions. What a good Bailey Yuanlong, daring to hide such selfish motives at this critical juncture. Long Fei Yi was unable to restrain his anger. Call Bailey Yuanlong over. As soon as Bailey Yuanlong came in and asked about the situation, he immediately explained, Your Highness, Deputy General Shui is slandering this general. It was clearly Deputy General Shui who refused to attack the three-way pass, so this general refused to share provisions. This general is innocent. Bailey Yuanlong, 10 days ago, this general asked you to lend me 30 dan of provisions, which you refused. 9 days ago, this general asked you to lend me 3,000 bows and arrows, which you refused again. Just 7 days ago, this general asked for 300 tents, what did you say? You said no. How did you know at that time that this general wasn't attacking the three-way black market? Deputy General Shui questioned. Humph, although you didn't say it clearly, you had this intention. Don't think this general didn't know. Bailey Yuanlong coldly retorted. The two of them continued to quarrel like this. Whether it was big or small, if they were sincere collaborators, how could they quarrel like this? Both of them clearly had selfish motives and wanted to compete for benefits, so neither of them gave in. If not for the fact that these two were the leaders of the two armies and couldn't lack them on the eve of a great battle, if not for the fact that Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi had to go to Tiger's prison to find out what was going on and couldn't personally lead the troops, they would have killed these two fellows on the spot. Bang! Long Fei Yi slammed his fist on the table with a loud bang. In an instant, Bailey Yuanlong and Deputy General Shui didn't dare to make a sound and both lowered their heads. Bailey Yuanlong, this crown prince will give you 1 day to calculate all the provisions in your hands and hand them over to the Western Qin princess. Long Fei Yi said. There's no need to hand them over to me. Hand them over to Myriad Merchant Hall's 5th elder. Han Yunxi said seriously, Deputy General Shui, I'll give you half a day to calculate all the provisions in family head Ning's hands and report them to 5th elder. From now on, 5th elder will be in charge of the allocation of provisions between the two armies. Anyone who disagrees will be dealt with according to military law. Deputy General Shui was wholeheartedly convinced that 5th elder was a member of the D clan. Bailey Yuanlong glanced at Long Fei, but didn't dare to speak as soon as he saw the man's furious face. Deputy General Shui, you still haven't answered this princess question. Han Yunxi asked again. East Qin had taken a big step back in terms of provisions. Although Deputy General Shui was a bit unwilling, he didn't dare ask for more. He cupped his fists and bowed. I'll listen to everything the princess says. These words really weren't easy to come by. Normally, Han Yunxi would laugh at herself, but at this time, her small face without any makeup was so cold and solemn that it was frightening. Do the two of you have any other questions? Han Yunxi asked coldly. Of course there were other questions, but compared to the attack on the three-way pass and provisions, they were small problems. Faced with their two furious masters, Bailey Yuanlong and Deputy General Shui were tactful and didn't dare mention it again. This prince will give you 3 days to redraft the cooperation plan. If there's any more trouble, do as you see fit. Long Fei Yi warned. Yes. This general obeys. Bailey Yuanlong and Deputy General Shui didn't dare to stay any longer and left together. Gu didn't know how many times he rolled his eyes. Gu Beiyue helplessly shook his head, but Ning Nuo let out a sigh of relief. He hurriedly asked, Your Highness, Princess, when are we going to Tiger's prison to rescue them? Now that Ning Nuo had lost contact with Tiger's prison, they could only make some conjectures. They had no way of knowing what had happened there. However, one thing was certain, something had happened to Bai Yuqiao. If nothing had happened to Bai Yuqiao, there was no way he hadn't replied for so long. Now that something had happened to Bai Yuqiao, Ning Cheng's plan had been exposed. Therefore, they couldn't be sure whether Ning Jing and the others were still imprisoned in Tiger's prison or had moved to another location. What they needed to do now was to make arrangements for the northern expedition as soon as possible, then rush to Tiger's prison to figure out the situation and discuss how to rescue them. Long Fei Yi looked at Gu Beiyue, who immediately understood what Gu Beiyue meant. Your Highness, Princess, this subordinate will go ahead and find out the situation. Gu Beiyue stood up. Find out the situation first, don't act rashly. Ning Cheng is still in Jun Yixie's army, Han Yunshi hurriedly instructed. Ning Jing and the others were in Tiger's prison, while Ning Cheng and Jun Yixie were in the army. Therefore, no matter which side they moved first, they would alert the enemy and hurt the other side. Han Yunshi had already thought of a countermeasure before going to Heaven Mountain. She, Long Fei Yi, Gu, and Tang Li would go to Tiger's prison to rescue Ning Qing, while Gu Beiyue would infiltrate the army alone to rescue Ning Qing. Tiger's prison was bound to be heavily guarded and wouldn't be easy to break through. However, things were different on Jun Yixie's side. Although Jun Yixie knew poison, Gu Beiyue's shadow art could still use a defensive strategy to save someone and then leave. Helpless, now that the situation had changed, they could only let Gu Beiyue make the trip first. With Gu Beiyue's terrifying speed, Bailey Yuanlong and Deputy General Shui should have already drafted the cooperation and battle plan between the two armies by the time he made the trip to and from Tiger's prison. Don't worry, Princess. This subordinate knows what to do, Gu Beiyue said seriously. Gu Beiyue was about to set out when a servant suddenly rushed in from outside. Young Master Nuo. Young Master Nuo, you have a letter. A letter from Tiger's prison. For a moment, everyone was shocked. Tang Li was the first to stand up and almost pounced over to snatch the letter. Ning Nuo rushed over and snatched the letter from the servant's hand. He hurriedly opened it and was shocked when he saw the internal energy in the letter. Not good. What's wrong? What's wrong with Ning Jing? Tang Li was so scared that his heart almost stopped. Ning Nuo handed the letter to Long Fei Yi and murmured, Jun Yixie invited you and the princess to Tiger's prison for tea. Although Long Fei Yi was surprised, he didn't panic. He looked at Gu Beiyue and said calmly, Save yourself a trip. Your Highness, is Jun Yixie abandoning the army? Gu Beiyue asked seriously. Even if Jun Yixie wanted to threaten them, shouldn't he have brought the hostages to the battlefield and forced them to retreat? However, Jun Yixie had chosen Tiger's prison. He was clearly going all out to deal with them. Chapter 1080. Jun Yixie's invitation was filled with conspiracy. Who knew how many people were lying in ambush at Tiger's prison? However, Jun Yixie had already sent an invitation, so how could Long Fei Yi's group not go? No matter what Jun Yixie had prepared for them, they had to go. Reply, we'll go as scheduled. Tell him to prepare tea and wait for us. Long Fei Yi said. Dreamy invitation was set for the first day of the 4th lunar month. Today was the 20th of the 3rd lunar month, which meant that they still had 8 days to prepare. After deducting the travel time, there wasn't much time left. 3 days later, Bailey Yuanlong and Deputy General Xue finished discussing the final cooperation plan and battle plan. They presented it to Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi for review. It had to be said that after these two fellows put aside their selfish thoughts, the plan they drafted was perfect. Whether it was Long Feiyi or Han Yunxi, they couldn't find any flaws in it. The Ning family army would be the vanguard, with 500 artillery soldiers and 15 red-coat cannons as the main attack force. 30,000 cavalry would bring up the rear. Once the Three Roads Pass was captured, the 30,000 cavalry would immediately pass through the border and enter. The artillery soldiers would be in the vanguard, followed by the cavalry, and then the 50,000 cavalry would bring up the rear, becoming a powerful shield for the artillery and cavalry. They planned to take the Three Roads Pass in half a month at the earliest and a month at the slowest. At the same time, 3,000 Ning family elites would lead the charge and 5,000 East Qin elites would infiltrate from the eastern mountain forest. After the cavalry entered, they would assist from the east. Moreover, the Bailey Navy would come north from the eastern sea, coordinating with the armies of the two sides to surround northernly. The 5,000 Ning family soldiers and 10,000 East Qin soldiers would be left behind to guard the Three Roads Pass. One reason was to supply the northern expedition, and two was to guard against Western Zhou and Tian'an. Although Western Zhou and Tian'an couldn't raise any big waves, they still had to be cautious and defend well. The military expenditure, the allocation of food, herbs, and other important resources were all under the Fifth Elder's control. The Fifth Elder was the most loyal person to Han Yunxi in the D clan. He was also a businessman. He might not be shrewd in other matters, but when it came to controlling money, few people could compare to him. Han Yunxi was very satisfied after reading the Fifth Elder's budget. She was right about the Fifth Elder. The Fifth Elder was astute and fair. He had no intention of favoring the D clan. The entire army was ready. They were just waiting for Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi to give the order to set off. As long as they gave the order, they could send out their troops at any time. Seeing that His Highness hadn't given the order for a long time, Bailey Yuanlong went to a fortune-teller to find an auspicious day to deploy the troops. When the red paper with the auspicious date and time was handed to Long Feiyi, he immediately rolled his eyes at Long Feiyi when he saw that it was the 15th of April. "Who told you that this is an auspicious day?" he asked coldly. Bailey Yuanlong could tell that His Highness wasn't satisfied with this date, so he didn't dare say anything else. Gu Beiyue said, "In my opinion, as long as it's earlier than the 1st of April, it's an auspicious day. Since the entire army is ready, why don't we head north tomorrow and attack the three-way pass directly? Let's give Ningqing a show of strength." Although they were very worried about the safety of the hostages in Jun Yixie's hands, they definitely couldn't show it. Instead, they had to give Jun Yixie and the others the misconception that they didn't care. Otherwise, Jun Yixie would have them completely under his thumb. At that time, not to mention rescuing the hostages, even they themselves would be in danger. Jun Yixie's invitation was set for the first day of the 4th lunar month. If they delayed until the 15th and something happened to them at Tiger's prison, then it was very possible that they'd failed to prepare for this battle. On the contrary, if they sent their troops before the appointment, they could first test Jun Yixie's bottom line, and second, they would have an additional bargaining chip to negotiate with Jun Yixie. No one knew that Gu Beiyue had another idea. He actually hoped that he could negotiate with Jun Yixie this time and make some concessions. There was no need to go to war and fight. Long Feiyi didn't know that Gu Beiyue didn't want to go to war, but he agreed with Gu Beiyue's opinion. Jun Yixie had already sent an invitation, so they had to return the favor. Long Fei looked at Han Yunxi and asked, "What do you think?" Han Yunxi also agreed with Gu Beiyue's opinion. At this juncture, let alone Tang Li, Ning Jing, and Mu Linger, even Shi and Long Fei had to serve the northern expedition. If there was a need, they had to give in without hesitation or even sacrifice themselves. However, she didn't answer Long Fei's question. Instead, she looked at Tang Li and asked, "Tang Li, what do you think?" The time Gu Beiyue mentioned was the most important time to consider the overall situation. However, this method might infuriate Jun Yixia as well as give Jun Yixia a show of strength. The most direct consequence of infuriating Jun Yixia was that the hostages would suffer. In Jun Yixia's eyes, the rule of not abusing the hostages during negotiations between two armies at war was bullshit. Perhaps it was Han Yunxi and Long Fei's return that gave Tang Li confidence and courage. He had been very well behaved these past few days. He slept early and woke up early. Every day, he was in high spirits. Other than learning about the northern expedition, he spent most of his time practicing martial arts and practicing his hidden weapons. When Long Fei and the others were discussing important matters, he would sit at the side. However, he only listened and never said a word. Han Yunxi's question caught Tang Li off guard. However, he quickly regained his senses and said seriously, "Everything has to be based on the overall situation. Do what needs to be done." No one knew if Tang Li's words were sincere or forced. Whether it was sincere or not, the fact that he could say it proved his determination and courage. Long Fei nodded and made a prompt decision. "Bailey Yuanlong, Deputy General Shui, you two pass down the order immediately. Everyone, listen up. Rest well tonight and set out tomorrow." "Yes." Bailey Yuanlong and Deputy General Shui said in unison and left to carry out the order. Long Fei asked seriously, "Gu Beiyue, if we set out tonight, how long will it take to reach Tiger's prison?" 3 days, Gu Beiyue answered truthfully. Su Donglin wasn't around, so he had to arrange many things. Naturally, he had already figured out the time needed to travel from Three-Way Black Market to Tiger's prison. 3 days, 3 days later. Long Fei pondered. 3 days later is the 28th of February. Han Yunxi quickly said, "That's why we have to set out tomorrow at the latest after the two armies set out for the northern expedition." Unexpectedly, Long Fei said, "We won't be participating in the northern expedition's military deployment ceremony. Have Ning Nuo reply to Jun Yixia and say that this crown prince will personally lead the troops to conquer Heavenly River City. I'll go have tea with him as promised." Tang Li didn't understand what he meant for a moment and was confused. Long Fei then said, "Tang Li, go prepare. We'll set out for Tiger's prison tonight. We'll arrive on the 28th and hold the hostages for a long time. We'll go have tea with Jun Yixia again in early April." When he said this, Tang Li was overjoyed. His dark eyes immediately lit up. "As you command, brother." He was so happy that he almost jumped out of bed last night. He had been waiting for this day for far too long. Goose sat on one side, clenching his fists as he laughed out loud. Long Fei, this old man likes this idea. Who cared what time Jun Yixia said for tea? They'd sneak into Tiger's prison to rescue the hostages first. Then they'd go have tea with Jun Yixia. When the time came, Jun Yixia wouldn't hesitate at all. Han Yunxi was thrilled as well. Although this idea was a little difficult, they had to succeed since Long Fei said it. Without the hostages in Jun Yixia's hands, they could drink the tea slowly. Gu Beiyue smiled faintly. "Your Highness, this subordinate is willing to cooperate with you to the best of my ability." With that settled, everyone went to make preparations. Han Yunxi personally packed up Long Fei Ye's belongings. He didn't return to his rooms, but went to see manager Luo of Kangon Private Bank. After the alliance between East Qin and the D clan, the central and southern regions loosened their restrictions on merchants, giving Cloud Realm Trade Consortium a chance to make a comeback. However, many of the financial groups and aristocratic families in the central and southern regions were dissatisfied. They'd already caused a ruckus in the south multiple times. Long Fei Yi was too busy, so he only pretended to be ignorant of the matter and left it to his subordinates to deal with. After all, the people in the south didn't dare to be too rampant, so it wasn't enough to affect the overall situation. Very soon, Han Yunxi finished her preparations. She was about to find Long Fei Yi when a servant girl brought over a bowl of dark brown medicinal soup. Han Yunxi was bewildered. She assumed that Long Fei Yi had ordered the servant girl to bring it over. After all, Long Fei Yi had a habit of giving her nourishing medicines from time to time. Dr. Gu had this servant deliver this. Dr. Gu said that the princess's complexion wasn't good and that she was going on a long journey. He was afraid that the princess wouldn't be able to take it, so he brewed this medicine and told the princess to finish it while it was hot before leaving, the servant girl replied. Dr. Gu also said that this was the first bowl. When the princess returns, you'll have to continue taking it. Han Yunxi picked up the bowl and sniffed it before tasting it. Besides one or two common medicinal ingredients, she really couldn't taste anything else. She didn't think much of it, but drank the rest of the medicine in one gulp. Besides Long Fei Yi, Gu Beiyue was the one person in the world she felt most at ease with. Han Yunxi sat for a while after drinking the medicine. Long Fei Yi and the others all came over. Gu Beiyue didn't mention the bowl of medicine, so Long Fei Yi naturally didn't know about it. For the trip to Tiger's prison, Long Fei Yi chose a few shadow guards to secretly accompany them. It was convenient for him to carry out his tasks. He didn't bring too many people because he didn't need them. If he wanted to kill Jun Yixie, he only needed him, Han Yunxi, Gu Beiyue, or Gu. And if he wanted to save the hostages, they might not be able to do it even if they worked together. They needed to use their wits. Long Fei Ye's group of 4, plus Tang Li, the group of 5 secretly left three-way black market that night. They chose a mountain forest path and headed towards Tiger's prison. On the evening of the 28th of March, they arrived at the mountain forest where Tiger's prison was located. This was a dense mountain forest west of northern Li's Tianhe city. It was the largest mountain in northern Li. The mountains were high, the ravines were deep, and the slopes were steep. The mountains overlapped each other and intersected with each other. There was an endless stretch of mountains. Tiger's prison was hidden in the deepest and densest ravine in this mountain forest. The topography affected the climate. The trees around Tiger's prison were dense all year round, covering the sky and the sun. The place where Jun Yixie invited Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi to drink tea was a cliff on the eastern side of Tiger's prison. It was called Tiger Roar Cliff. It got its name because there were more tigers in the mountain and they roared at the cliff, intimidating the whole mountain. Standing on Tiger Roar Cliff, one could overlook the entire ravine. However, one couldn't see Tiger's prison, only a patch of lush vegetation. Jun Yixie's invitation letter included a map. It was the route from the foot of the mountain to Tiger Roar Cliff. However, as early as a few months ago, Bai Yuqiao had already given Han Yunxi and the others a detailed topographic map of Tiger's prison and the surrounding mountains. He also wrote down everything she knew about the ambushes around Tiger's prison clearly in the letter. There were many roads leading to Tiger Roar Cliff. Which one Jun Yixie gave them was the most dangerous one. At this moment, Han Yunxi's group of 5 was at the foot of the mountain, looking up at the long stretch of mountains and steep ridges. Jun Yixie asked them to meet at sunset the next day. In other words, they still had one night and one day tomorrow to sneak into Tiger's prison and save the hostages. Chapter 1081. Han Yunxi and the rest were already at the foot of the mountain. One day and one night was more than enough for them to save someone. Han Yunxi unfolded the map Yu Qiao had given her and found the location of Tiger Roar Cliff. She said seriously, Tiger's prison is in the deep ravine behind Double Peak Mountain. We have to cross Double Peak Mountain first and observe the situation before making any arrangements. Long Fei Yi and the other three men had no objections. Gu took the lead as usual. Tang Li wanted to follow, but Han Yunxi pulled him back. Tang Li, now is not the time to act on impulse. You're a father now. If you want to protect your wife and child, you have to ensure your own safety first. Han Yunxi said seriously. Jun Yixia was different from other people. Not only was Jun Yixia highly skilled in martial arts, but he also knew how to use poison. Seventh young master and I will take the lead. You and your brother follow behind us, Han Yunxi said as she pushed Tang Li to Long Fei Yi. However, Long Fei Yi let Tang Li follow Gu Beiyue from behind. He held Han Yunxi and whispered, I'll take you up the mountain. Even though her qigong was very good, he still wouldn't let her go alone. He had to take her with him. Many times, a woman's strength didn't mean that she didn't need to be taken care of. And when a man took care of a woman, it wasn't a kind of care for the weak. It was a kind of love and a habit. Gu was secretly delighted to be able to walk with Poison Girl. When he saw Long Fei Yi flying towards him with Han Yunxi in his arms, he didn't even want to wait and rushed forward. Gu Beiyue's eyes flashed with a smile. He said to Tang Li, Clan Master Tang, we're already here. There's no need to rush. Follow me and stay behind. Okay. Tang Li accepted it calmly. The group climbed over the mountain smoothly. However, when they reached the mountainside of the second mountain, Gu stopped abruptly and said, Poison Girl, there's poison on the mountain. Han Yunxi asked Long Fei Yi and Gu Beiyue to stop. It's poisonous, and there's a lot of it. This season was the time when poisonous creatures came out of their caves. There were many poisonous creatures in the forest, but no matter how many there were, they wouldn't be so densely packed together. Human judgment might be wrong, but the judgment of the detoxification system would never be wrong. There are poisonous snakes all over the top of the mountain. There's basically no place to stand. There are also several groups of poisonous mosquitoes, Han Yunxi said seriously. Everyone was shocked. Even Gu was surprised. He knew that there were poisonous creatures at the top of the mountain, but he didn't expect there to be so many of them. He scolded, Is Jun Yixia crazy? He's not crazy. I'm guarding against our sneak attack, Han Yunxi said coldly. The poisonous creatures at the top of the mountain, whether they were poisonous snakes or poisonous mosquitoes, were not rare creatures. They were only poisonous in large numbers. Even if there were more of them, no matter how scary they were, they wouldn't be able to stop Han Yunxi. Jun Yixia didn't set up these poisonous creatures to attack. They were the first line of defense for Tiger's prison. If they wanted to pass through this line of defense, they would definitely exterminate these poisonous creatures. Once she dealt with these poisonous creatures, Jun Yixia would know that they were coming. After passing through the second mountain, there were many paths to enter Tiger's Denver. However, this was the only path to pass through the second mountain. Jun Yixia's first line of defense was flawless. There was no way for them to avoid it. If they wanted to pass through this path, they would have to alert Jun Yixia. Therefore, there were only two choices in front of them. The first was to wait until tomorrow evening and let Jun Yixia pick them up to go to Tiger Roar Cliff for tea. The second was to exterminate all the poisonous creatures on the mountain and openly tell June Xia that they were coming. Everyone was silent for a moment. Long Fei said, "Tang Li, do we wait or do we charge? You decide." Although Tang Li was the Tang clan's clan head, he rarely made any major decisions. He looked at Long Fei and was a little stunned. "Don't dawdle. Think carefully and say it," Long Fei said again. Tang Li clenched his fists and said loudly without hesitation, "Charge." Long Fei was very satisfied with this answer. Han Yunxi and Gu Beiyue couldn't help but laugh. Gu put his arm around Tang Li's shoulder and said, "Kid, I have faith in you." They charged right away. Han Yunxi led the way. She asked Long Fei and the others to find some dry firewood and light 10 big fires. Then, she put some unknown poison into the fires. "Here, one antidote for each of you. Go up the tree and watch a good show." Han Yunxi took out a few pills. Gu Beiyue and Tang Li did as they were told and quickly climbed up the tree. "Poison girl, what poison did you put in?" Gu was very curious. "It's a secret." "Hurry up and go up the tree," Han Yunxi urged. Gu took the antidote and flew up to sit on a tall tree. White smoke rose from the fire and a strong fragrance wafted out. Long Fei protected Han Yunxi and flew to Gu's side. As the smoke and fire spread, a rich aroma gradually spread throughout the forest. After a while, they saw several groups of black fog flying towards them. "What's that?" Tang Li asked. "There are 3 types of poisonous mosquito swarms. The other type is extremely poisonous. If you are bitten by one of them, your wound will swell within 2 hours. If you don't take the antidote within 4 hours, you will definitely die," Han Yunxi answered seriously. "June Xia." Tang Li narrowed his eyes. Gu was very familiar with poisonous mosquito swarms. If he hadn't seen it before, even Long Fei and Gu Beiyue would have thought that it was poisonous fog. As the poisonous mosquito swarms got closer, the buzzing sound became louder. When they got closer, they realized that the poisonous mosquito swarms were fighting to be the first to pounce into the fire. They looked down from the tree and saw a black mass of poisonous mosquito swarms like a huge black fog. They surrounded the fire and drowned it. Even the smoke couldn't float out. "Sister-in-law, will the fire be extinguished?" Tang Li asked softly. Han Yunxi didn't answer. Because, just as Tang Li finished his sentence, the huge black fog below suddenly dissipated and became densely packed black spots, scattered around the fire. "They're all dead?" Tang Li asked curiously. Gu Qishao was curious as well. He really wanted to know what kind of poison Lass had used to attract all of the mosquitoes to her, sending them flying to the fire. Gu was about to go down the tree to take a look. But, halfway down, he immediately flew up. He was so shocked that he broke out in cold sweat. Because, he saw countless poisonous snakes crawling out from the surrounding bushes. There were poisonous snakes of various sizes and colors. They were densely packed and were fighting to be the first to crawl out. They came so suddenly and their speed was so fast that it caught everyone off guard. Gu wasn't frightened. He was disgusted. Instead of saying that these poisonous snakes crawled out, it was more accurate to say that these poisonous snakes flowed down from the mountain like a flood. Not long after, the fire was surrounded by poisonous snakes. Their slippery bodies intertwined and squeezed together. They revealed their flat tongues and stuck out their red tongues, as if they were looking for something. Han Yunxi and the rest looked down from the tree. Not only did they see the densely packed snakes below, they also saw that the surrounding mountain paths were filled with poisonous snakes coming down the mountain. This scene was simply magnificent. If people with trypophobia saw this scene, they would definitely go crazy. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to call this mountain Snake Mountain. Sister-in-law, this isn't a good show. It's too disgusting. Tang Li was about to vomit. Just wait. Han Yunxi's lips curled into a cold smile. More and more snakes came down the mountain, but the poisonous snakes that gathered at the foot of the mountain gradually retreated and scattered in all directions. Once the snakes below dispersed, there would immediately be more poisonous snakes to replace them. This repeated a few times before the poisonous snakes finally dispersed. The fire was more or less extinguished. The surroundings were filled with the corpses of poisonous mosquitoes, forming a large black mass. Long Feiyi estimated that there were at least 8,000 or 9,000 poisonous snakes in the mountain, if not 10,000. Poison lass, where's the good show? Gu also didn't understand. Poison lass had poisoned the smoke and attracted the poisonous mosquitoes and poisonous snakes. The poisonous mosquitoes were dead, but the poisonous snakes were safe and sound. Let's go up the mountain. Han Yunxi smiled. Princess, the snakes are still in the forest. Gu Beiyue couldn't help but remind her. Snakes don't need mosquitoes. As long as everyone is careful, we won't be bitten. Let's go, the good show is on the mountain. Han Yunxi smiled mysteriously. Long Feiyi didn't say anything and flew down the tree with her in his arms. Tang Li and Gu Beiyue followed closely behind. Gu also immediately caught up. They didn't land on the ground. Instead, they used the branches as leverage to fly up the mountain. The journey to the top of the mountain was very smooth. However, at the top of the mountain, they immediately saw Han Yunxi's so-called good show. The mountain peak was littered with the corpses of archers. Every archer was bitten to death by poisonous snakes. Tang Li and Gu Qishao carefully counted the corpses and discovered that there were 500 archers in total. Gu Qishao then inspected their arrows and discovered that they were all coated in hypertoxic poison. They hadn't even reached Tiger's prison, but there were already 500 archers lying in ambush on the mountain peak. What did Jun Yixia want to do? Fortunately, Han Yunxi poisoned the poisonous snakes and caused them to counterattack. Otherwise, if they rashly went up the mountain, they might have really fallen into an ambush. Sister-in-law, where are those poisonous snakes? Tang Li asked anxiously. They continue to help us clear the way. Han Yunxi said seriously. This was already the top of the second mountain. On the other side of the mountain was the deep ravine where Tiger's den was. They walked to the edge of the cliff and looked down from above. They could only see that the ravine was immeasurably deep. There were plants everywhere, and they couldn't see a single stone or soil, let alone Tiger's prison. The only thing that could be seen was an overhanging cliff in the northwest direction. That should be Tiger Roar Cliff. The huge army of poisonous snakes had already climbed down the ravine from the top of the mountain. The poison Han Yunxi used on the poisonous snakes was a kind of bloodthirsty poison. Once poisoned, the poisonous snakes would frantically look for prey to bite. After this forest was occupied by the poisonous snakes and mosquitoes, the other animals would either die or flee. Therefore, the only prey of the poisonous snakes were the people lying in ambush in the bushes. Han Yunxi was waiting. She was waiting to see how many ambushes Jun Yixia had hidden in this forest. She was also waiting to let Jun Yixia experience what it meant to bring evil upon oneself was the hardest to bear. When Han Yunxi set the fire to lure the poisonous mosquitoes away, Jun Yixia already knew that they were coming. He also knew that they were going to force their way in. The poisonous mosquitoes and poisonous snakes were just his guards. Sacrificing these poisonous creatures didn't affect Jun Yixia at all. His real ambush was the archers and gunpowder. He didn't make a sound and just waited for Han Yunxi and the others to come down into the ravine. Who knew that instead of Han Yunxi and the others, the poisonous snakes would betray him? Your Highness Duke of Kong, the 500 archers at the top of the mountain were all wiped out. Half of the second batch of archers also died. I don't know what's wrong with those poisonous snakes. They've all gone crazy and are biting anyone they see. When the guard came to report, Jun Yixia was stunned. What did you say? Chapter 1082. Jun Yixia never expected the snakes to counterattack. After all, he'd spent a lot of effort to get his hands on these poisonous snakes. In fact, he didn't need so many snakes to guard against Han Yunxi's group's sneak attacks. Instead, he filled the entire mountain with snakes to give Han Yunxi's group a warning. He wanted to tell them that he, Jun Yixia, wasn't so easy to bully. He wanted to tell them that they'd pay a heavy price if they tried to trick him. But who knew that he'd end up smashing his own foot with a rock? He'd stationed countless archers on the shady side of the second layer of the mountain, a total of 10 archers. But no matter how many archers there were, they couldn't compare to the number of poisonous snakes. No matter how powerful their arrows were, they couldn't kill off a swarm of snakes. Any of the snakes in the mountains might be common, but they were also highly poisonous. Once bitten, they'd kill you within a short time. After all, the archers were the second line of defense, the true defense. They were the key to keeping Chang Fei Yi and the other experts in check. When Jun Yixia stood up, he couldn't even stand straight and swayed. If news of this spread, he'd become the biggest joke in the history of Cloud Realm continent. Your Highness Duke of Kong, what's wrong with those poisonous snakes? Is there no way to break through them? If this keeps up, we'll lose our footing, the guard reminded him urgently. Prepare all the defenses at Tiger's prison. Keep a close eye on Ningqing. Jun Yixia said before he rushed out, his figure disappearing into the forest. Once he was in the woods, he could hear the occasional cries of agony from all around him. Not far away, he could even hear the hissing of a large group of poisonous snakes as they fought to be the first to move forward. Jun Yixia followed the sounds and saw a few of the archers dead from poison. 2 of the snakes were crawling over their bodies in search of other prey. As soon as Jun Yixia approached, the poisonous snake smelled his scent and immediately turned around to pounce on him. Jun Yixia was not afraid of them. He stepped on the head of a poisonous snake with one foot and grabbed the tail of a poisonous snake with one hand. When the poisonous snake turned its head to bite him, he fiercely threw it to the ground and killed it. He picked up the dead snake and carefully examined it. Only then did he realize that the venomous snake had been poisoned. However, he could not determine what kind of poison it was. Furthermore, he had studied poison for so many years, but he had never heard of any poison that could make a poisonous snake so violent and bloodthirsty. Jun Yixia's big movement immediately attracted more than 10 poisonous snakes. Some were thinner than his arm, while others were as big as pythons. The poisonous snakes surrounded him, all of them flicking their red tongues, eager to attack. In Jun Yixia's eyes, they were no different from traitors. The more Jun Yixia looked at them, the angrier he became. He suddenly leaped into the air and shot out several poisonous needles, immediately killing all the poisonous snakes. The giant pythons were still aggressive even after being hit by a few needles. They swept their huge tails at him fiercely. The poisonous snakes were bloodthirsty and purely saw Jun Yixia as prey. Jun Yixia had no choice but to kill them. He flew sideways and dodged the giant snake's attack. He was so angry that his face turned green. Even though he was unwilling, he had no choice but to kick the giant snake's huge head into smithereens. After these few snakes died, the surroundings were already surrounded by another group of snakes. Moreover, there were still many more around. Dreamy had no choice but to escape. Otherwise, who knew how much time he would waste on killing these poisonous snakes? Unable to find a way to break through, Dreamy had no choice but to order all the archers to retreat into the deep ravine. He ordered people to cut down the trees around Tiger's prison and spread a circle of poison. In this way, the poisonous snakes could only enter Tiger's prison by crawling over the ground. Once they came into contact with the poison, no matter what kind of poisonous snake they would be poisoned and their flesh would rot and die. Han Yunxi and the rest stood at the top of the mountain and looked down. Although they couldn't see the specific movements in the forest, they could hear all kinds of wails coming from the forest. They also saw a few large movements in the vegetation. Are they retreating? Tang Li asked suspiciously. Yes. Many of them have retreated. They should be all archers. Long Fei said. He had set up this kind of ambush in the forest many times before. He had also been ambushed by others a few times. He was all too familiar with this kind of movement. Sister-in-law, it's really a good show. Beautifully done. Tang Li was overjoyed. Poison lass, you're amazing. Gu gave her a thumbs up with a fawning expression. What's that poison called? Why don't you give some to Chi brother? Han Yunxi generously gave Gu a bottle. These poisonous snakes will go crazy for at least 3 days. We can rest tonight and continue watching the show tomorrow. When she said this, Gu Beiyue and Long Fei both laughed. God knows how many archers Dreamy had set up an ambush. God knows how much danger they would face if they barged in. They were all prepared for a tough battle. However, Dreamy just had to give them a chance to rest. Originally, night was the best time to sneak into Tiger's prison. But now, they could rest assured and give the best time to the poisonous snakes. Unless Dreamy had a poison similar to Han Yunxi's, even if he poisoned a large number of poisonous snakes, it wouldn't be something that could be settled in one night. In one night, the poisonous snakes would be able to kill all the ambushes in the mountain and even attack Tiger's prison. Of course, if Dreamy left Tiger's prison and took the initiative to look for them, they wouldn't mind treating him to tea first. The sky gradually darkened. Han Yunxi and the others looked down into the ravine and couldn't see anything. Apart from darkness, there was only darkness. The mountain forest was quiet to begin with. It was even quieter at night. The hissing of the snakes in the mountain rose and fell one after another. They could tell that the snakes were all heading into the ravine. Han Yunxi and the others sat in a row on a large rock on the cliff at the top of the mountain. Han Yunxi and Long Fei sat together. Tang Li sat beside Long Fei and Gu sat beside Han Yunxi. Gu Beiyue sat behind them. In a sense, Gu Beiyue was the Real Shadow Guard. It was the end of March and the beginning of April. There was no moon in the sky. Coincidentally, there was no moonlight, so the stars in the sky were especially bright. They looked up from the top of the mountain and felt that they were very close to the sky. The stars in the sky were just above their heads. They could reach out and pluck them. Han Yunxi couldn't help but reach out. She immediately realized that everything was just an illusion. The sky was actually very, very high up. Poison girl, do you want the stars? Gu asked with a smile. Han Yunxi didn't answer. She thought that once they went up the mountain, they would have to fight to the end. Who knew that they would have the opportunity to sit on the top of the mountain and look at the stars? Han Yunxi looked at the stars and slowly leaned back. Long Fei also lay down. His arm was already behind her head, waiting for her. Han Yunxi wasn't surprised as she rested in Long Fei's arms. It was as if this was already a habit. She was about to answer Gu's question when Tang Li said, "Of course my sister-in-law wants it. Are you going to pluck it?" "Ha, you have to ask your brother to pluck it." It was rare for Gu to be so modish to Long Fei Yi. He turned to look at Long Fei Yi. "Are you going to pluck it?" As soon as he said that, a shooting star streaked across the sky. They all sat up in shock. "Tang Li, quick! Make a wish," Han Yunxi said anxiously. Tang Li had no idea what was going on. "If you make a wish when you see a shooting star, it will definitely come true," Han Yunxi said seriously. She didn't know when she would believe in such things. Tang Li immediately said loudly, "I hope that Ning Jing and the child are safe and sound." "You can't make a wish out loud." Han Yunxi wanted to correct him, but seeing how serious Tang Li was, she gave up. Han Yunxi didn't notice that Long Fei Yi was sitting at the side and closing his eyes for a while. Soon, they lay down again, and the topic of plucking the stars was interrupted. Hearing Tang Li's wish, Gu was no longer in the mood to joke. He put his hands behind his head and looked at the bright stars. Gradually, he became distracted. "Gu, why aren't you worried about Mu Ling Er?" Tang Li suddenly asked. Gu was stunned for a moment and replied, "Am I not here to save her now?" That one sentence made Tang Li speechless. However, without Tang Li's reminder, Gu really forgot about that little girl Mu Ling Er. He didn't even think about her. It was fine if he didn't think about her, but after being reminded, he still missed her quite a bit. It seemed like it had been a long time since someone chased after him, searched the world for him, and inquired about his whereabouts. Gu closed his eyes and recalled Mu Ling Er's appearance. A face that loved to cry appeared in his mind. In the whole world, Mu Ling Er was probably the only one who called him Chi brother. They fell silent. Everyone was immersed in the starry sky and immersed in their own thoughts. Tang Li couldn't even count how many days it had been since he last saw Ning Jing. The last time they met in Myriad Merchant Hall, they even quarreled. He wondered what the first thing he should say when he saw Ning Jing. He wondered what Ning Jing's first words would be when she saw him. Would she scold him? Or would she ignore him? Or would she ask him to carry the child? As he thought about it, a sweet smile appeared on Tang Li's lips. Even if they met, he would gladly endure Ning Jing's beating and scolding. The mountain breeze caressed them and the stars twinkled. Everyone was a little sleepy. Gu Beiyue silently guarded behind them. He looked at the moonless night sky and smiled faintly. The moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The brighter the moon, the more lonely it was. And this sky full of stars was so lively and vast, but there was no place for the moon. It was only when he looked up at the night sky that Gu Beiyue remembered his real name, Lone Moon. After some time, Gu Beiyue suddenly said, "Princess, Your Highness, look at the bottom of the mountain." Everyone sat up with a start. They saw that Gu Beiyue was no longer behind them. He was standing at the edge of the cliff, looking at the deep ravine. What happened in the deep ravine? Han Yunxi and the others hurriedly stood up. They saw that a light had appeared in the originally dark ravine. "Is that Tiger's prison?" Tang Li exclaimed. "They must have cut down all the trees around Tiger's prison. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to see the light." Gu was also surprised. Han Yunxi smiled. Jun Xia is guarding against snakes. Long Fei Yi squeezed his wrists and stretched his muscles. "Cold," he said, "get ready to go down the mountain." Jun Xia had already returned to Tiger's prison. Of course, they couldn't give him a chance to breathe. Now that things had come to this, they naturally had to stand at the entrance of Tiger's prison. Chapter 1083. Han Yunshi and company confidently descended the mountain without any obstructions. Han Yunshi detected a circle of poison in front of Tiger's prison's entrance from afar. Jun Xia had used it to prevent the venomous snakes from entering. The circle of poison was about 3 meters away from Tiger's prison's entrance. A large number of venomous snakes had died inside and outside the circle of poison, but the venomous snakes behind continued to surge in. As the venomous snakes were poisoned, they could not control themselves. Even when they saw their own kind dying due to poison, they continued to advance without stopping. As Han Yunshi and company had taken the antidote, they did not become the targets of the venomous snakes. They stood outside the circle of poison on the ground, allowing the countless venomous snakes to crawl past their feet. Not only were there venomous snake corpses in front of Tiger's prison's entrance, there were also 5 rows of archers. They stood in a disorderly fashion, with their bows drawn and ready to shoot. It was like a dense wall of arrows, with the arrows all aimed at the 5 of them. Who knew what the result of 10,000 arrows being released would be? However, Tiger's prison's entrance was tightly shut. They did not see Jun Xia's figure. Han Yunshi stood in the middle, Long Fei Yi and Tang Li were on the left, while Gu Beiyue and Gu were on the right. The 5 of them naturally saw the group of archers, but they were not afraid. Since they chose to barge in, they were mentally prepared. Not to mention 5 rows of archers, even if there were 10 or 100 rows, they would not even frown. Jun Xia, how long has it been since we last met? Why are you so cowardly? What, are you afraid to see me? Gu shouted. As soon as he spoke, there was a whoosh as a sharp arrow flew out. Gu Qishao's lips rose into a cold smile. He didn't move, but tilted his head slightly to the side. The arrow whistled past his ear. You don't dare to come out, right? Brother, let's kill our way in. Tang Li said coldly as he raised a special crossbow. At this time, Jun Xia's voice came from inside the door. Long Fei Yi, Han Yunshi, this prince has made an appointment for tomorrow evening. Are you that impatient to drink tea with this prince? Gu Qishao laughed out loud. Wang. Didn't the Northern Dynasty's emperors dethrone you long ago? What, you still don't know? Jun Xia, if you can live until tomorrow evening, this prince doesn't mind deigning to have a cup of tea with you. Long Fei Yi coldly snorted. With Gu and Long Fei Yi singing the same tune, Jun Xia immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. With a flip, he leaped onto the roof and looked down at Long Fei Yi and the others from above. He said, Long Fei Yi, Han Yunshi, if you want Ning Qing to live until tomorrow evening, then just wait for me. Where's Ning Jing? Where's my child? Tang Li couldn't help sniffing. Jun Xia began to laugh. Tang Li, if you kneel down and beg me, I might consider letting you see your child. Tang Li was unable to restrain his anger and the crossbow in his hand was about to shoot out. Who would have thought that Han Yunshi would make a move first and shoot out a golden needle? Jun Xia did not notice the needle, but he noticed the poison and quickly dodged it. Seeing the golden needle fall onto the roof and shatter a tile, he was incomparably shocked. He never thought that Han Yunshi's internal energy would be this strong. How long had it been since they last met? Just what did Han Yunshi experience during this time? Wasn't she a martial arts waste? If he hadn't noticed the poison, he might have been killed by Han Yunshi's needle. Han Yunshi said coldly, Jun Xia, if you want to negotiate, you have to act like you're negotiating. Let us see all the hostages first. Otherwise, you'll have to bear the consequences. Jun Xia felt guilty. He only had Ning Qing in his hands. However, none of the people who came today were from the D clan. He had to guard against Han Yunshi and Long Fei Yi abandoning Ning Qing and killing him. In this way, even if he wanted to perish together with Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi, he might not be able to kill them. Who wants to negotiate with you? Jun Yixia said angrily. Then what do you want? Tang Li was anxious. Jun Yixia suddenly laughed. Men, move aside. Open the door. With the order, the 5 rows of archers in front of Tiger's prison retreated to the left and right, opening up a wide path. At the same time, their arrows were all pointed towards the center. The door of Tiger's prison slowly opened. Jun Yixia descended from the roof and stood in the courtyard outside the door. A cold and insolent smile appeared on his lips. He said, Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi, the hostages are in the room behind me. Do you dare to come in? Long Fei Yi and the others were all on guard when they heard his words. The archers outside the door could still see and guard against them. However, in the small tiger's prison, who knew what kind of ambush Jun Yixia was hiding? Long Fei Yi did not answer Jun Yixia. He ordered coldly, without seeing the hostages, no one is allowed to take a step in, especially Tang Li. In Bai Yuqiao's letter, Ning Jing and Mu Ling lived in the big courtyard behind Jun Yixia. When he thought of Ning Jing and the child being so close to him inside, Tang Li's eyes became wet. Ning Jing must have known that he was here. Was she holding the child and waiting to see him? Tang Li's tears didn't fall, but his heart was about to break. However, he persevered and replied loudly, this subordinate obeys. Strictly speaking, he was also Long Fei Yi's subordinate. This should be the first time in his life that he said this to Long Fei Yi. Regardless of whether Jun Yixia wanted to negotiate with them or not, this stalemate was a negotiation. Only by remaining calm could they control the situation and win. It had to be known that winning or losing was not only related to the hostages' safety, but also related to everyone's safety. It even related to whether or not the northern expedition could continue. If they fell into Jun Yixia's hands, then the northern expedition would be over. Jun Yixia sneered and said, Long Fei Yi, I have so many hostages. Which one do you want to see? All of them. Long Fei Yi replied. Jun Yixia snorted, Long Fei Yi, what right do you have to negotiate with me? Long Fei Yi said, even without entering Tiger's prison, this prince can still kill you. Jun Yixia did not even have time to refute before Long Fei Yi pulled out his sword. His movements were so fast that Jun Yixia could not see it clearly. The sword rose and fell, and with a flash of sword light, the arrows on the bowstrings were all cut. Moreover, the bowstrings did not break. The archers looked at the arrows that fell and were all stunned. Jun Yixia's heart skipped a beat. Han Yunxi's martial arts was already unbelievable to him, but he never thought that Long Fei Yi's martial arts would reach this level. Thinking of the past, he and Long Fei Yi's martial arts were on par. In just a short 2-3 years, Long Fei Yi had already reached a height that he did not dare imagine and could only look up to. Actually, not only in terms of martial arts, even in terms of status, Long Fei Yi had already left him in the dust. Long Fei Yi was the East Qin crown prince, and he was an old subordinate of the East Qin royal family. Long Fei Yi was no longer the Long Fei Yi of the past, and Han Yunxi was no longer the Han Yunxi of the past. As for him, he could not take a single step forward. Jun Yixia couldn't help thinking, just what had he done in these past 2-3 years? He was already filled with jealousy, and this jealousy was wreaking havoc in his heart, swallowing his reason. If he couldn't surpass them, then he would destroy them. Jun Yixia loudly said, Someone, bring Ningqing over for me. When this was said, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi immediately looked at each other. Gu Beiyue and Gu also looked over at them. When they were at Heaven's Peak, they had also been threatened with hostages, but they had still taken them away. If Juni Xia could let them see all the hostages, they wouldn't mind taking them away. After all, they didn't want to waste words with Juni Xia. Very quickly, the guards brought Ning Qing over. However, Han Yunxi and the others were shocked. Ning Cheng's hands and feet were tied behind his back with gunpowder strapped to his chest. Ning Cheng! Han Yunxi loudly shouted. Ning Cheng slowly raised his head. It was unknown when the phoenix feather mask on his right eye had been taken off by him. Although he was much more haggard and his face was covered in stubble. But he was still handsome. His facial features were sharp and his face was deep. The stubble didn't make him look down, rather it added to the aura of a mature man. His clothes were filled with tears and one could tell with a single glance that they were whip wounds. Only the heavens knew what Juni Xia had done to him. If one didn't look carefully, no one would be able to tell that his right eye was devoid of life. However, Han Yunxi and the others all knew that Ning Cheng's right eye was blind. His vision of things and people was reduced by half. He slowly raised his head and saw Han Yunxi at a glance. He actually smiled, a slight smile. Han Yunxi never knew that Ning Qing could be so beautiful and brilliant when he smiled. She suddenly remembered what Ning Jing had said while crying in Medical City. She didn't dare to look at Ning Cheng's eyes again. Even if it was an accident, even if she didn't mean to hurt him, she still didn't have the courage to look. Damn Bai Yanqing, damn Juni Xia, damn the Black Clan and Feng Clan, damn the grudges between Eastern and Western Qin. If there weren't so many misunderstandings, things wouldn't have turned out like this. Ning Cheng's mouth was gagged and he couldn't say anything. He could only move his head. His smile quickly disappeared and he respectfully nodded at Han Yunxi as a salute. He slowly shook his head at Han Yunxi and the others, wanting to tell them not to come in. Ning Jing and the others were not in Tiger's prison. Juni Xia only had him as a hostage. Juni Xia not only tied gunpowder to him, but also buried countless gunpowder in Tiger's prison. As long as they stepped in, Juni Xia would perish together with them. Juni Xia grabbed the rope around Ning Cheng's waist with one hand and held a match in the other, looking very threatening. Han Yunxi and the others naturally saw Ning Qing shaking his head and knew that he was telling them not to go in because there was an ambush. But how could they retreat just because there was an ambush? Gu Beiyue quietly walked to Long Fei Ye's side and whispered to him. They were evaluating whether they could make it in time if they made a move to snatch the hostages. Of course, they were just evaluating. Because they hadn't seen the other hostages yet. Where are the others? Long Fei Yi asked. Juni Xia sneered, Long Fei Yi, I didn't expect you to be afraid. Why, are you afraid to come in? If you only have one hostage, then only one of us can go in, Gu Beiyue said. But Juni Xia said, Han Yunxi, come in first. Although he hated Long Fei Yi the most, he wanted Han Yunxi to die with him. He wanted Long Fei Yi to have a taste of loss and powerlessness. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.